Chapter 8:17. After eating mutton giblets soup and supper, Ning Ke did not drink much wine. When he walked out of the Chow mansion, he was no longer drunk in the cold wind. However, he still felt restless, or rather, bored. The carriage went to the guest house. He asked the coachman to leave and walked into the garden with the help of his crutch. Through the snow window, he saw Mo Shanshan writing. The candlelight was the same as before, and the girl's eyebrows were still beautiful. He stood quietly outside the window for a long time before he knocked on the door and entered. However, he did not know what to say. Ning Ke wanted to drink with Mo Shanshan, but it was already late at night when he entered the room. He did not know what to say, so he said, "How is Cat Girl now? We talked about marriage." Mo Shanshan was about to pour tea for him. She looked at his expression and could not help smiling. She said, "I want to drink now. Will you keep me company?" They drank a few dishes, 2 bowls of vegetable porridge, and a pot of old wine from the Great River Kingdom. Mo Shanshan asked, "You have a knot between your eyebrows." Ning Ke put down the cup and rubbed his eyebrows. He said, "Is it so obvious?" Mo Shanshan smiled and said, "If not, why would you come to me at night?" Ning Ke was silent for a moment and told her what happened tonight. He did not mention the dirty things he told Qin Chi. He said with emotion, 5 years ago, when I sent Li Yu back to Chang'an, I saw Hua Shangyue for the first time at the entrance of Northern Mountain Road. I did not like him then, and I still don't like him now. However, I did not expect that he would risk his life to save Li Yu. Love is really hard to understand. Love is. Mo Shanshan turned the cup and looked at Ning Ke quietly. She said, "It is hard to understand." Ning Ke was confused by her gaze. He reached out his chopsticks to pick up the fried fish, but the fish slipped from the chopsticks. He put his chopsticks on the table and changed the topic. "The reason why I'm a little depressed is because of the affairs of the world. That day on the snowy street, countless people died, but they died in a refreshing way. Tonight, most of the people survived, but it made me very uncomfortable. Erba Chow told me that if I want to ask for the heaven's way, then ignore the affairs of the world. If the affairs of the world disturb us, then we should cut them down like how we cut the Abbey Dean. It's easy to say, but difficult to do." Mo Shanshan tucked her fine hair behind her ear and said, "On the path of cultivation, everyone will be troubled by these choices. I once had the same problem, but later on, I realized that I am a very greedy person. I want to question the heavenly Tao, I want to reason with the affairs of the world, and I want to ponder over love." She looked up at Ning Ke and said, "That year on the Hua Mountain, I wanted to ask Master Qishan a question, but I didn't. At that time, I thought I had figured it out. However, after returning to the Great River, I sat by the ink lake and looked at the reflection on the water and the flowing clouds in the blue sky. I found that the so-called understanding was just an escape. I was always a little unwilling. This is greed. Because you once said that you like me, and I still like you." Ning Ke was silent for a long time and then said, "I like you too." Then he looked at the bamboo outside the window and thought of that long night when he cursed the heavens and the earth by the snow lake. He said, "That day she ran away, but she didn't run far, so I could catch her. This time she ran to the sky, too far to come back, so I can't do anything about it." There seemed to be no relationship between these words, but Mo Shanshan understood. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly, and there was no sadness on her white face, only calmness. "I like you, and you like me. That's good." She looked at Ning Ke and said, "As for other greed, it might have been possible in the past, but probably not now. I won't feel sad because this is probably God's will." She poured a cup of wine and slowly pushed it in front of Ning Quebec. Then she looked at the night sky outside the window and said with a smile, "Because she is God." Ning Ke looked at her breathtakingly beautiful face and drank the wine in his cup as a sign of respect. Chang'an City was getting colder and colder, and the winter was getting colder and colder. Time passed slowly and unstoppably. Quietly, the 18th year of Jianqi came to an end. The little emperor had not officially ascended the throne, and the Tang Empire was in the hands of the empress. It would probably take some time before the new year was changed. The war had not completely stopped, and the Tang Empire was still under great pressure. No one knew how many people had died, but the new year had to be celebrated, and it would be more lively. Ning Ke spent the new year in the academy. His senior brothers and sisters at the back of the mountain were injured, disabled, or recovering. The New Year's Eve dinner fell on Imo Shanshan and Tang Xiaotang, with the help of the little attendant. Although the dinner was not ready until the moon climbed up to the top of the mountain, they finally had a hot meal. Everyone drank a lot of wine that night, and toasted to the bright moon several times. If the headmaster had the time to drink the wine toasted by his disciples, he would probably be drunk. It was peaceful and warm, as if everything had happened yesterday. But in fact, everyone felt that the back of the mountain of the academy was missing something important. Perhaps it was the teacher who liked to be a food connoisseur, or perhaps it was Sang Sang who had been in charge of cooking for the past few years. At the turn of the new year, the situation in the world had changed a lot. Because of the cold weather, the cavalry of the Golden Tribe Royal Court stopped their crazy attack and entered a temporary truce with the Tang army. The Golden Tribe Royal Court set up camp in Kaiping of the 7 stockade villages, while the Tang army stuck to the Xiangwan plain and did not retreat. The king of the Yueluan kingdom, the commander of the army, and other important figures were all killed by eldest brother. The main force of the army was annihilated by the Tang Western Army in front of the Pamir Mountains. The Western Army took the opportunity to break through the Pamir Mountains and directly attack Chaoyang City, intending to destroy the country. They broke through 17 cities along the way, and only received an urgent letter from Chang and when they reached the north of Chaoyang City. After reading the letter signed by the Imperial Court and the Academy, General Xu Qing thought for a while, and then forcibly ordered the army to retreat, despite the shock and opposition of his generals. When the Tang Western Army retreated from Chaoyang City, smoke and dust rose into the sky. The people of the Yueluan kingdom could not believe their eyes. When they were sure that the Tang army would not attack the city again, the entire Chaoyang City became a sea of welcome. Countless people of the Yueluan kingdom wept bitterly, and then began to splash water to celebrate. On the way back, the Tang Western Army was even sent off by the people of the Yueluan kingdom. From time to time, the gentry, people, and monks of the Yueluan kingdom would bring the army provisions, water, and eggs dyed red. The generals of the Western Army, who had firmly opposed the retreat at first, finally realized that the perennial warmth of the country could not be judged by ordinary logic. It was indeed meaningless to conquer them. The most shocking change happened at the Verdant Canyon. For some reason, the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army, which claimed to have hundreds of thousands of people, began to retreat to the south. They did not try to break through the Verdant Canyon, nor did they intend to take a detour to the north. Instead, they retreated to Qinghe Prefecture and waited silently for something. The southern army of the Tang Empire rushed thousands of miles to the Verdant Canyon, abandoning countless supplies along the way. Most of the soldiers even threw their armor deep into the mountains. They were exhausted and held on by sheer willpower. Because of the retreat of the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army, they finally had a precious chance to breathe. However, the arrival of happiness was so sudden that neither the generals of the Southern Army nor Chang understood what had happened. The most powerful coalition army of the Divine Halls had done nothing in this worldwide war against the Tang Empire. To be more precise, they had not played any role and had retreated just like that. Why on earth was that? The Tangs could not understand, and the people of the South Jin Kingdom could not understand, especially the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom, who had been immersed in extreme grief because of the death of his son. It was impossible for him to understand, so he was very angry. Then he died of anger. After the new year, the news of the death of the Emperor of the South Jin Kingdom spread throughout the world. According to the official statement of the South Jin Kingdom, the great emperor of the South Jin Kingdom had died of a sudden illness because he had been working too hard on state affairs. He had been reading memorials continuously for 3 days and 2 nights without sleep. The imperial center administration of the Tang Empire had found some other statements in the south. Although they could only confirm some fragments, it was enough for the people in Chang'an to deduce what had happened. On the day before his death, the emperor of the South Jin Kingdom was furious because of the retreat of the West Hill Divine Palace coalition army. He summoned the generals of the South Jin Kingdom into the palace and scolded them. He even scolded the dead commander-in-chief by Haishin. However, the emperor still could not be happy. He ordered the sword Garrett to send someone to the palace to explain why the Battle of the Verdant Canyon had turned out this way. The Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, was recuperating. With his status, he naturally would not go to the palace to explain. The sword Garrett randomly sent a disciple to the palace. That disciple was called Lu Yiqing. Then, there was no then. The death of the emperor of the South Jin Kingdom was probably just a simple record in the history books. It was not much different from the gloomy bloodstains in the countless palaces in history. However, in the eyes of those who were observant, the death of the emperor was a very important matter, because it represented a fundamental change in the power structure of the human world. Cultivators did not have enough power to influence the imperial power in the secular world. Many details in the war against the Tang Empire had already proved this. Whether it was the cultivators of the Yan Kingdom, the array tactical masters and sword masters of the Tang army, or the priests of the Golden Tribe royal court, they were not much different from ordinary people in front of the charge of thousands of cavalry and the rain of arrows. It was also this war that proved another possibility. The real powerhouses at the peak of the knowing destiny state could change the color of rivers and mountains once they showed their power. For example, the 3 people who fought in the Verdant Canyon battle. The solemn South Jin Kingdom palace seemed so weak and vulnerable in front of the sword of a blind man. This had something to do with the power of the sword Garrett, but in fact, it proved a fact. The headmaster left the human world and went to heaven. From that day on, the human world was no longer the human world of the past. This was the so-called heavenly earth. The next chapter is almost finished. It will be updated soon. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 8:18. Powerful cultivators like Liu Bai, Jun Mo, and Yi Su had always existed. The world 1,000 years ago was a world of powerful cultivators. Whether royal or ordinary people, they were just pitiful people struggling in the cracks. However, there was a sage every 1,000 years. As the headmaster built the Tang Empire, the West Hill Divine Palace made corresponding changes, and the situation changed fundamentally. With the 2 mountains of the Academy and the West Hill Divine Palace, even the strongest cultivator had to obey the rules of the secular world. Unless they could surpass the 5 states, they would find that there was always a blue sky above their heads, making it impossible for them to get out. Now that the headmaster had ascended to heaven, heaven did not seem to care about the human world anymore. The West Hill Divine Palace had suffered great losses in the war, and the deterrence of the 2 mountains and the blue sky was weakening. Under such circumstances, powerful cultivators could naturally breathe more fresh air, not to mention people like Liu Bai, the Sage of Sword, who could surpass the 5 states at any time if he wanted to. Therefore, the emperor of the South Jin Kingdom died quietly. It was a natural thing because he did not understand the changes in the world. The more powerful the person, the more freedom they had. Once they had the ability to control this freedom over the human world would fall into chaos, just like the barbaric years before the Tang Empire. Now it depended on whether a visiting professor of the Divine Hall like Liu Bai still had enough respect for Haotian Taoism. At the same time, it depended on whether the people in the academy could open an umbrella for the people like the headmaster. Judging from the current situation, the West Hill Divine Palace had been weakened the most in this war. However, the Haotian Taoism sect had ruled the world for countless years, and its foundation was unimaginable. No one knew if there was a hermit in the knowing destiny state hiding in a simple Taoist temple on a mountain. Other than Master Chi Mei, who was seriously injured, the power of the Buddhism sect was not affected much. Neither Qi Nian, the world wayfarer of the Buddhism sect, nor the soldier monks of the Xiankong temple joined the war. It was because of the Buddhism sect's own philosophy that they would not take the initiative. Other than Taoism and Buddhism sect, the most powerful force in the world was the Golden Palace. Other than the wolf-like cavalry, the nation master and the dozen high priests were enough to deter most cultivators. The sword garret of the South Jin Kingdom had already begun to show its edge. The aristocratic families who had been keeping a low profile for many years now dared to show their faces in this precarious time. The secular world, which had been controlled by the three unknown lands for countless years, was bound to become chaotic. No one knew what would happen in the end. If they wanted to see the future of the human world clearly, all the cultivation sects had to keep an eye on the academy in the south of Chang'an City. No matter how silent the academy was now, it was still the academy. In the future, it will be the world of the strong cultivators. Unless the headmaster of the academy returns to the human world, or the West Hill Divine Palace recovers its power in the shortest time possible, there will be chaos for a while. Ning Ke looked into the carriage through the green curtain and said, "You should be soberly aware of this now. Those ministers should also be aware of this and learn to accept reality." In the new year, the situation in Chang'an was chaotic and complicated. When the external pressure exerted on the Tang Empire by the West Hill Divine Palace coalition army and the cavalry of the Golden Palace temporarily disappeared, some hidden problems gradually surfaced in the Tang Empire's seemingly united court. Especially a few days ago, when the news of Hua Shanyue's death came from the front line, the entire Chang'an city was shaken. Hua Shanyue was a descendant of an aristocratic family. He had become the military supervisor of the 3 states of the Gushan Commandery a few years ago. He was very powerful in the army and had a high status. He was expected to become a future general of the Tang Empire. In the Tang Empire's army, dying in battle was not just a tragedy for ordinary soldiers. It was common for generals to die on the battlefield. Generals of a higher rank than Hua Shanyue had been killed by the enemy's arrows countless times in the Tang Empire's thousands of years of history. Logically speaking, the news of Hua Shanyue's death would definitely cause sorrow and regret in the court, but not such a violent shock. But that was not the case. As the military supervisor of the 3 states, Hua Shanyue did not need to take the lead. At least, he did not need to lead his subordinates into the dangerous battlefield when the war was gradually calming down. Most importantly, everyone knew the reason why Hua Shanyue was sent to the northern battlefront army by the academy. Therefore, the news of Hua Shanyue's death ignited the anger of the princess's faction in a very short time. After the court meeting the day before yesterday, the white-haired minister of the Ministry of Rights shouted at the palace wall with tears streaming down his face, "Even if he is guilty, how can he die without a trial? Your Majesty, how can you face His Majesty?" The minister of the Ministry of Rights was a bigwig of the princess's faction. There were many people like him in the court. Moreover, the Hua family was an aristocratic family of the Tang Empire and had many close disciples and old friends. If the Empress and the Academy chose to purge the power in the court at this time, it would definitely hurt people's hearts. But if they did not hurt people's hearts, they would inevitably be in chaos. The fact that the Empress was the saintess of the diabolism was still not accepted by many people in the Tang Empire. The most dangerous thing was that if the chaos of the people's hearts was linked to the accusation of the Tang imperial family by Haotian Taoism, it would definitely bring great trouble to the Tang Empire. The West Hill Divine Palace had not launched an attack on public opinion in this regard, but everyone knew that it was only a temporary calm. There were many horse carriages parked in front of the House of Red Sleeves, but it was very quiet inside the building. There was no sound of musical instruments, music, or applause after a dance. There were more than 10 tables in the hall. The people sitting behind the tables were all important figures in the princess's faction. Some of them looked angry, some were thoughtful, and some were calm and silent. No matter what emotions they were feeling, they looked at the table in front of them coldly. The table was placed in front of them, some distance away from the other tables. Ning Ke sat behind the table and quietly looked at the ministers in front of him with different expressions. He was Mr. 13 of the academy, and no one in the Tang Empire dared to disrespect him. But at this time, no one paid attention to him, so he seemed very lonely. Ning Ke was very used to this kind of loneliness, whether it was in mid-mountain or in the wilderness. He raised the flagon and filled the cup in front of him. He looked at the ministers in front of him and said, "I know what you are thinking. You are not reconciled, or you are not convinced, or you are suspicious of the Empress, or you think that I have done something inappropriate." The ministers slightly raised their eyebrows and thought, "Do you really dare to admit it?" Ning Ke raised his cup and said, "But I will not explain to you, because I don't need to. The law of the Tang Empire is above, and rules must be obeyed. When the Tang army can go south from the verdant canyon, recover the Qinghe River, or go deep into the wilderness and burn the golden tent, we will talk about what happened today." A minister said, "Then why did Mr. 13 ask us to come here today?" Ning Ke said, "I want you to shut up." The minister could not restrain his anger and scolded, "Why do you want us to shut up?" Ning Ke said, "Spreading rumors without evidence is a false accusation. At this time, doing such a thing is tantamount to treason. You should know the seriousness of the matter. If you don't shut up, what do you want to do?" "We want to see Her Highness." "No." Ning Ke said, "Her Highness is a criminal, and no one can see her. If you insist, then tomorrow we will start the trial of Her Highness for tampering with the edict of the late Emperor." "Then let's start the trial." The silent minister of the Ministry of Rights finally spoke. His voice was a little tired and sad. He said, "At least I can't watch Her Highness die quietly like General Hua." Ning Ke looked at the wine cup in his hand and was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Then let's see her." As he said this, the bead curtain behind him moved slightly and made a clear and melodious sound. Li Yu, who was wearing a palace dress, walked slowly into the hall accompanied by two handmaidens. There was a sudden sound of bowls and plates in the building. More than 10 ministers stood up and looked at Li Yu with shock and excitement. After a while, they came to their senses and bowed to her. This was the first time since the incident that Li Yu had left the princess' residence. It was also the first time these people in the court had seen her. At this moment, seeing that Her Highness was in good spirits even though she was a little thin, the ministers finally calmed down. Li Yu looked at these ministers and thought about how these people still did not abandon her even in this situation. She could not help but feel touched. She bowed and said, "Thank you, everyone." The ministers said in unison, "We dare not." Ning Ke held the wine cup and looked at it as if he was an outsider. Then he raised his head and looked at the ministers. He said, "If you still can't calm down, I can promise you that Her Highness will not die quietly like Hua Shangyue. I will let her die in front of you and let everyone in the world see the scene of her death." The ministers were still immersed in the excitement of seeing Her Highness. When they suddenly heard Ning Ke's words, they suddenly felt as if they had been pierced by an ice knife and a chill went straight into their organs. A young general sitting in the corner shouted angrily, "Who dares to touch Her Highness?" Ning Ke drank up the wine in his cup and got up to leave the hall. He walked upstairs. He did not answer the young general, nor did any of the ministers in the hall. It was extremely quiet in the building. Only the sound of people's rapid breathing could be heard. Because of anger, nervousness, and fear, they finally remembered that Ning Ke even dared to kill the emperor. In the room on the top floor of the House of Red Sleeves, the table was covered with embroidered cloth and a celadon bowl was filled with tremella soup. The bottom of the porcelain bowl was placed on the gorgeous peony flower. Ning Ke drank up the tremella soup and wiped his mouth. He said, I just drank a cup of wine. I don't need to wake up. Mistress Jian said, the problem is that you didn't eat much of the snacks on the table. Ning Ke then realized that she had been watching what happened downstairs. He said, I really have no mood to eat these days. Mistress Jian said, I asked Dewdrop to cook glutinous rice balls. I remember you like them. Thank you, Aunt Jian. Ning Ke paused for a while and continued, tonight's matter, the academy gave Aunt Jian face. Tomorrow is Saturday. 2 chapters for those who asked for leave the day before yesterday. Happy reading this weekend. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 8:19. Mistress Jian said, this is for the sake of Her Majesty. Ning Ke said, it involves the academy. Even the Empress has to call me youngest uncle. I don't have to give her face. Mistress Jian looked at him quietly and asked, do you really want to kill Li Yu? Ning Ke said without thinking, letting her die is the best choice. Why? Mistress Jian asked. Ning Ke explained, after killing Li Huiyuan and Li Yu, who can the ministers be loyal to even if they are still disloyal? No matter how painful and unwilling they are, they have to obey Her Majesty. In many people's eyes, this war makes it inconvenient for the imperial court and the academy to kill these people. But if you look at it from another perspective, after killing Li Yu, the pressure of the war and the name of righteousness will become pressure on these ministers. After hearing his words, Mistress Jian sighed and said, I used to think that you and your youngest uncle were very similar. Later, you learned his great spirit, so I thought that you two were more similar. Now I realize that you are 2 different people after all. Ning Ke said, I can never catch up with youngest uncle in this life, but I believe that I can do better than him in some things, such as the situation the Tang Empire is facing now. Mistress Jian smiled bitterly and said, so he is dead. Ning Ke said calmly, I am not afraid of death, but I want the Tang Empire and the academy to live. Mistress Jian looked at him with pity in her eyes. She put her hand on her chest and said after a while, but have you ever thought that although the prince has a good relationship with Summer, her surname is also Li? Hearing this name, Ning Ke thought of many things, such as the thick blood in the general's mansion. He said, in my eyes, he is already dead. I just need the right time. Mistress Jian said, your calmness will make people feel afraid. Ning Ke stopped talking about this and asked, I still want to know why Her Majesty opposes me killing Li Yu. She should not be the kind of person who can be influenced by petty feelings. I really don't know what Summer is thinking. Mistress Jian looked out of the window. It was already dark and a bright moon was hanging above the city wall. She looked confused and asked, is the headmaster really gone? Ning Ke stood up and walked to the window to look at the bright moon. He said, who knows? After a pause, he continued, except for him and Haotian, who else knows? After the new year, Ning Ke stayed in Chang'an. It was not because it was inconvenient to go back and forth to the academy, but for more important reasons. He was waiting for the arrival of the West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic corps. As spring approached, the Divine Hall's diplomatic corps finally arrived in Chang'an. Under the complicated gazes of the Tangs, the convoy of the diplomatic corps drove through Vermilion Bird Avenue and entered the hotel. The composition of the diplomatic mission was a little complicated. The leader was the head of the Revelation Institute of the West Hill Divine Palace. His 2 deputies were a prince of the South Jin Kingdom and the Prime Minister of the Yen Kingdom. It was a little funny, but what was really not funny was that the throne of the South Jin Kingdom and the Yen Kingdom was still empty. The war had temporarily come to an end, but the 2 armies were still in the north and south of the Tang Empire. The situation was tense, so the negotiation between the 2 sides quickly began with the arrival of the diplomatic corps. The learned officials of the imperial court of the Tang Empire and the members of the West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic corps sat on both sides of the long table and began to argue as expected. Of course, there was a need to negotiate. Arguments often depended not on who was more reasonable, but who had more strength. The negotiation between the two sides in the side hall of the imperial palace was only one aspect. The most important, or perhaps the most crucial, place for negotiation was in another place in Chang'an, where there was a rippling lake. Before the battle with the Abbey Dean, Ning Ke walked in the streets with his knife and cut off the traces left by Sang Sang. Naturally, he could not avoid the house by Yanming Lake. Fortunately, the damage was not too serious and it did not take long to repair it. He had been living here since the new year. The thick snow on Yanming Lake had long melted, and the ice became a very thin mirror. Then it shattered and was blown to the shore by the wind, piling up into a snow roll, revealing the clear lake water. Ning Ke stood by the lake and reached out to push away the willow branches that had not yet sprouted green buds. Looking at the faint green stems in the water, he naturally remembered the scene of him and Sang Sang rowing a boat to plant lotus on the lake that summer. The clouds above the lake gradually gathered. There was no sound of spring thunder, but rain quietly fell. This was the first spring rain in Chang'an this year, so it naturally brought with it a bit of chill. Ning Ke walked back to the house and took a towel to wipe the rain off his body. At this moment, he heard someone knocking on the door. He walked to the front of the courtyard and listened to the knocking sound. After a moment of silence, he opened the door. The rain continued to fall, soaking his clothes and the woman outside the door. Ning Ke looked at her and felt as if he had returned to that summer. She did not wear a green Taoist robe, but a blood-red robe of judgment. Her black hair did not look messy because of the wet, as she wore a luxurious crown. But she was still as beautiful as ever. Ning Ke's eyes were very calm, even when he saw the two people behind her. They were Lu Yiqing from the Sword Garret and Xie Qingyun, who was now an official of the Ministry of Rights of South Jin Kingdom. Lu Yiqing and Xie Qingyun bowed to him calmly. Lu Yiqing's eyes were blinded by Ning Quebec. He and Xie Qingyun knew each other in the academy. But as time passed, there was no need to remember many things at this time. The courtyard door slowly closed, and the people accompanying them were all shut outside. Yi Hongyu followed Ning Ke into the house. Ning Ke and Yi Hongyu sat under the rain porch of the plum garden, staring blankly at the spring rain falling from the sky. The sound of rain falling into the Yanming Lake could be faintly heard from the south wall of the courtyard. Now that I think about it, the days when I lived here were indeed peaceful. Yi Hongyu reached out to catch the falling rain and said, but the world is ever changing, and the peace will not last long. Ning Ke looked at the rain splashing on her white jade-like palm and said, since you became the great divine priest of judgment, your words have become more and more inhuman. Yi Hongyu withdrew her hand, looked at him and said, are you provoking me? Bullshit. Ning Ke handed her the towel and said, you'd better speak human words in front of me. He and Yi Hongyu had known each other in the wilderness for a long time. They had once killed each other, but they had never fallen in love. They had once lived together, but they had never been of the same mind. From the very beginning, they knew that one day, they would kill each other, and they had tried many times. Interestingly, perhaps because they knew this very well, they seemed especially calm when they were together, as if there was a breeze lingering between them, making them feel refreshed. Ning Ke asked, the Abbey Dean and the Hierarch are still alive. Do you mean what you say? Yi Hongyu said, since I have come to Chang'an, of course I mean what I say. The problem is that the Academy has never been involved in politics. How much influence do you have on the people in Chang'an? Ning Ke said, the token of the devil's doctrine is with me. You know the Empress background, so you don't have to doubt it. Yi Hongyu said, the Tang Empire will pay a great price, and the devil's doctrine demoness will not be able to suppress all the opposing opinions in the court. So what is the point of this agreement? Ning Ke said, first of all, I don't think we will suffer too much from this agreement. Secondly, as for the effectiveness and execution of the agreement, this is something for the Academy to consider, not the Divine Hall. Yi Hongyu said, if it is ineffective, then there is no point in negotiating. Ning Ke said, negotiation itself is the point. Yi Hongyu said, that's boring. You have become so lifeless and stale because of a woman. It's ridiculous. Ning Ke's expression did not change. He said calmly, Haotian Taoism rules the world and claims to have countless powerhouses. Isn't it even more ridiculous that a woman like you has to risk her life in Changpan? Yi Hongyu said, what danger is there in Changpan for me? Ning Ke said, I can kill you at any time. Yi Hongyu said, in the swamp, if not for those wild horses, you would have been killed by me. Ning Ke said, this is not the mud field in the wilderness. This is Changpan. Yi Hongyu's eyes turned cold. She said, so what? Ning Ke said calmly, I am invincible in Changpan. Even the Abbey Dean will be sent flying by me. I don't think you have any chance of defeating me. Yi Hongyu said, but don't forget, no one can defeat Haotian. Ning Ke wanted to say that he had bullied Haotian badly in the igloo by the hot sea in the far north, but he did not say it in the end. This was a matter between him and Sang Sang, and had nothing to do with anyone else. Fighting with heaven is endless joy. He thought of his teacher's words and suddenly had a new understanding. He could not help but laugh. Yi Hongyu said, if the headmaster could really defeat Haotian, he would not become the moon, but the new Haotian. Ning Ke said, this speculation seems to be correct, but it is completely wrong. Because you do not understand what kind of person the headmaster is. He has no interest in becoming the sky and covering everyone's head. He would rather turn into light and shine on the world, feeling the joys and sorrows of this world. The conversation in the spring rain was not a test. It was to determine the tone of the negotiation. It was not to guess the other party's bottom line, but to know what the other party wanted and where the rain would flow. Since some of the spring rain fell into Yanming Lake, and some seeped into the soil under the plum bushes, it seemed that they could not gather in one place in a short period of time. Then they needed to talk about something more specific. At this moment, Ning Ke raised his hands and reached to her temples, as if he wanted to touch her cheeks. Yi Hongyu did not react, as if she did not see his hands. Ning Ke asked, don't you feel heavy now? Yi Hongyu said, of course, but there is no one to help me carry it. Ning Ke took the divine crown off her head and said, hurry up and find someone else. Yi Hongyu's wet black hair scattered on the divine robe, making her look even more beautiful. She looked at Ning Ke and said, where can I find someone as shameless as you? I have to go out for the whole day today, so I did not have time to write. I worked hard to write these 2 chapters last night. I really admire my hard work, and these 2 chapters are definitely in my favorite style. The next chapter will be updated soon. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 820. Negotiation was a battle. The one who proposed the conditions first would be the one to make the first move. Ning Ke and Yi Hongyu were good at fighting. They knew that the one who proposed the conditions first would gain the upper hand in the battle. That was why they thought that they should be the ones to propose the conditions first. This is Chang'an, my home ground. Ning Ke said. Yi Hongyu looked at him quietly and said, the Tang Empire is in danger now. The cavalry of the Golden Palace and the Divine Hall Coalition Army are still in your territory. Ning Ke said, this is a little troublesome, but it is not the key. I heard that the Abbey Dean, the hierarch, and your brother are all crippled. I really don't understand why you are so confident. Yi Hongyu said, the situation in the academy should be worse. Mr. Second lost his right arm. I heard that Mr. First and the 23-year cicada cultivation are still in wheelchairs. As for your other disciples, I saw their injuries in front of the Verdant Canyon. I know they won't be able to recover in a short time. Ning Ke looked at her and said seriously, you forgot about me. Yi Hongyu looked at him and said calmly, "The problem is that you can't leave Chang'an. You may be invincible here, but there are many people in Haotian Taoism who can kill you if you leave Chang'an." Yes, Ning Ke had never left Chang'an since the new year. This was the only place where he could borrow the power of the God-stunning array through the array pestle. Even though he was also a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state, he was not powerful enough to affect the entire world. Yi Hongyu continued, "Haotian Taoism has existed for thousands of years. Even though the waves are a little dim now, I can find you 10 cultivators in the knowing destiny state at any time if you want to see them." If she was not exaggerating, this was enough to scare most people in the world. After all, there was not even one cultivator in the knowing destiny state in some small countries. But this was not enough to scare Ning Quebec. He said, "Even if there is a day when there are so many cultivators in the knowing destiny state and Tianqi state, it will be meaningless. If they dare to come to Chang'an, I will kill them all. If they are not in the Abidine state, they are just courting death." Yi Hongyu said, "Will you stay in Chang'an for the rest of your life?" Ning Ke felt that these words sounded like a wedding vow. He smiled and said, "If it's really necessary, I have to do it. Fortunately, there are wine, meat, and beauties in Chang'an. It won't be too boring." It seemed like they were fighting over who could make the first offer, but in fact, both of them had already placed their chips on the table. Ning Ke did not wait for Yi Hongyu to continue and suggested, "Let's play rock paper scissors. This is fair and simple." Yi Hongyu frowned slightly. Ning Ke said, "You are the Tao addict. You are said to know everything. Don't you know how to play the finger-guessing game? You should know that rock paper scissors is also a way to win or lose. It is very particular about spirit, boldness, and calculation." Before he could finish, Yi Hongyu asked, "What fist?" Ning Ke said, "Lewd fists." Yi Hongyu asked, "What fist is this?" Ning Ke said, "You want to learn? I can teach you." Unsurprisingly, Yi Hongyu lost. Although she was a Tao addict who knew everything, she was no match for Ning Ke in terms of gambling. One had to know that Ning Ke had gambled since he was young. He had gambled from the city of Wei to Chang'an. After experiencing hardships and even narrowly escaping death, he was finally able to cultivate. The first thing he thought of was to win money at the gambling shop. Yi Hongyu was very angry. It was not only because she did not like to lose, but also because she finally understood the meaning of lewd in the lewd fists. It was actually the word lewd. Ning Ke explained, "This is a culture that has a long history. I'm not trying to take advantage of you." Yi Hongyu took a deep breath of the slightly cold air. The moisture of the spring rain moistened her lungs, allowing her to finally control her emotions. She thought that there was indeed no other person in the world who was as shameless as Ning Quebec. The Divine Hall Coalition Army has withdrawn from Qinghe Prefecture. We have to take back Qinghe Prefecture. Ning Ke's expression became serious. He said, "There is no room for discussion on this matter." Yi Hongyu's expression did not change. No one could tell what she was thinking. She asked, "What about the surnames?" Ning Ke said, "Of course we have to kill them all." Yi Hongyu was still non-committal. She said, "Continue." Ning Ke said, "The Yen Kingdom has respectfully returned the remains of the soldiers of the Northeast Border Military. Crown Prince Chongming has come to Chang'an to ask for forgiveness. He has knelt in front of the coffin for an entire night. We have no more requests. Continue. In order to express the sincerity of the Tang Empire and its attitude of peace, we are willing to withdraw from the Yueluan Kingdom. But the Pamir Mountains must be given to us. Also, the Great River Kingdom must obtain permanent neutrality. Anything else? Nothing else. Do you want to hear the Divine Hall's conditions? To be honest, I really don't want to hear it. Because neither the Academy or the Imperial Court will agree to it. But you still have to listen in the end. It's already noon. Let's eat first. Ning Ke asked Yi Hongyu to change out of the divine robe of judgment. It was a little sad that Yi Hongyu's clothes were still in the plum garden. The two walked to the Yanming Lake and walked along the wooden bridge among the reeds to the west. They walked to the street and left Lu Yiqing and Xie Qingyun who were in front of the courtyard. Ning Ke bought a few sesame cakes on the street and continued to walk to the southern city with her. On the way, they saw many people holding crutches and many injured soldiers. Most of the injured soldiers were carried back from the front line. They looked very miserable with broken limbs. Most of the people were injured on the day the Abbey Dean entered Chang'an. The entire city is filled with people holding crutches. Yi Hongyu said, the Tang Empire is already in such a miserable state. Why does the academy still have to hold on? Ning Ke said, the same scene can be interpreted differently. In the eyes of the Divine Hall, so many injured people holding crutches is enough to prove that the Tang Empire is about to collapse. But in my eyes, it proves that the Tang Empire is still very strong because we have the ability to save the injured from the front line. Most importantly, even the most ordinary Tangs dare to fight against such a terrifying enemy like the Abbey Dean. The entire city is filled with people holding crutches. No, in my eyes, they are not crutches. They are all knives, very sharp knives. Yi Hongyu said nothing more. Ning Ke stopped at the entrance of the Shishir alley in the southern city. There were two big trees at the entrance of the alley. One was an unknown tree, and the other was an unknown tree. They were gradually turning green in the spring breeze. Yi Hongyu asked, has the calligraphy addict left? Ning Ke said, she is studying with eldest brother in the academy. Yi Hongyu said, if we want to ask about heaven's way, how can we be trapped by love? I was thinking about this a few days ago. Ning Ke walked to the tree and looked for green buds among the bare branches, but found it difficult. We saw these two trees turning green in the spring breeze, but now it is difficult to find green buds under the tree. Heaven's way is like spring, which can only be seen from afar. Small things like love are like green buds. You can see heaven's will, but you can't catch it. It is because you don't want to lower yourself to the dust, and you don't want to put your eyes on the bare and ugly bark. Heaven's way is a small matter. He looked at Yi Hongyu and frowned slightly. I didn't see second brother fight with Lu Bai and Yi Su in front of the verdant canyon, but you saw it. Don't tell me your thoughts haven't changed. Yi Hongyu thought of what her brother said before he left and fell silent. Everyone's way is different. Teacher's way is against heaven's way. What is yours? Ning Ke looked at her and said, what are you pursuing in this life? In the past, you wanted to catch up with your brother and become a powerhouse in Haotian Taoism. You wanted your brother to be the Abbey Dean. But what's the point of being the Abbey Dean? You still wandered around the South Sea for decades and couldn't even return to the Jishou Abbey. Later, you wanted to become the strongest and surpass your brother. But what's the point? You and I may be the two best at fighting in this world. No one in the same state can be our match. But have you ever thought that I can't become the headmaster, and you can't become as strong as the Abbey Dean? Then what's the point of cultivating like this? Yi Hongyu said, not everything needs to be interesting. Ning Ke said, teacher once said that we don't live to have meaning, but to be interesting. Yi Hongyu said, I live to become stronger. Ning Ke asked, I once desired to become stronger because I wanted to survive with Sang Sang. I also wanted to take revenge, so I had an obsession. But you grew up in the Jishou Abbey and then went to the Revelation Institute on the Peach Mountain. Finally, you entered the judicial department until today. Your life has been smooth sailing. Where did your obsession come from? Yi Hongyu said calmly, not everything needs a reason. Becoming stronger can be understood as an instinct. Just like how an ant sees two green leaves, it also wants to take the bigger one. As a cultivator, I am not interested in power or profit. But I always like the feeling when I stand on the top of the mountain and look at the scenery. Ning Ke thought of the time when he successfully climbed the mountain and saw the scenery on the top of the mountain. At that time, the starlight was like silver, the clouds were floating between the cliffs, and there were a few mountain peaks in the distance. It was extremely beautiful. That feeling is really good. He agreed with Yi Hongyu. Yi Hongyu said, "You didn't kill Li Yu. Aren't you worried about internal strife?" Ning Ke looked at the calm passers-by on the street and said, "Is it possible for you to see internal strife in Changpan? The Divine Hall has many spies in Changpan. You should know that I can kill her at any time. I just don't want to for now." "So you don't want to kill her, or you can't bear to kill her?" Yi Hongyu said, "You don't want to kill her because of her relationship with the Golden Tribe Royal Court. You haven't mentioned the Golden Tribe Royal Court before. It seems that you have already made arrangements for the north." Ning Ke said, "I don't have any arrangements." Yi Hongyu said, "The Divine Hall has an influence on the Golden Tribe Royal Court that the Academy can't imagine." Ning Ke said, "Isn't it just the everlasting heaven? When I passed by the wilderness last year, I felt something strange. After that, I asked someone to investigate and found out that the Divine Hall has been preaching in the Golden Tribe Royal Court all these years. It's really interesting." Did Hao Tian think that no one would recognize him after he changed his identity? Yi Hongyu didn't expect that he already knew about this. She said, "You have no arrangements for the north and rejected the Divine Hall's good intentions. What do you think about the Golden Tribe Royal Court?" Ning Ke said, "I only have one thought about the Golden Tribe Royal Court." Yi Hongyu asked, "What is it?" Ning Ke said, "Kill them all. I wish everyone a happy weekend. 2 more chapters tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 821. This sentence itself and the unspoken meaning hidden in it were very bloody and cruel. However, Ning Ke's tone was very calm and normal, as if it was a matter of course. He looked calm and even had a sincere smile on his face. To him, there was nothing to talk about with the Golden Tribe Royal Court. He would not accept anything other than being killed. Even Yi Hongyu felt a chill at this moment. Spring had just arrived, and some of the green buds on some trees were so small that they were hard to see with the naked eye, while some of the trees had already sprouted tender green leaves. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew on the street, snapping the tender stems and causing green leaves to fall. Chinya landed on the ground from the sky, and the conversation finally came to an end. Yi Hongyu raised the demands of the West Hill Divine Palace, which were in direct opposition to the conditions that Ning Ke had raised by the Yanming Lake. The Divine Palace wanted to ensure the independence of Qinghe Prefecture, and they wanted the Tang Empire to pay a large amount of war reparations, and the royal family had to go to Peach Mountain to apologize. The Golden Palace wanted the large pasture around Xiangwan Plain and Helan City. As for Yueluan, Yan, Jin, Qi, and Song, they naturally had their own demands, but they were relatively unimportant. After a moment of silence, Ning Ke asked, "What's going on with Longqing now?" 2,000 elite cavalrymen were annihilated. Although he was lucky enough to survive, he was heavily injured and is currently recuperating in the Divine Hall. I don't know when he will recover. Yi Hongyu did not like Longqing at all. Her expression did not change when he was mentioned, but she did not understand why Ning Ke would suddenly mention him. She said, "Although his cultivation state is above yours, you should not be so vigilant." Ning Ke said, "Asking doesn't mean being vigilant." Yi Hongyu said, "Then why ask him? A few years ago in Chang'an, I said something to him." Ning Ke said, "I told him at that time that you were really beautiful. In that case, don't think too much about it." Yi Hongyu remained silent. Ning Ke looked at her and said with a smile, "Everyone knows that Tao Addict is the most beautiful woman in the world. So I shouldn't be too optimistic." Yi Hongyu said, "No matter how strong you are in your words, no matter how unwilling you are, you still have to accept these conditions. Ning Ke said with a smile, I don't see any reason to promise you. Yi Hongyu said, I can't tell either. But someone told me that you would agree. Ning Ke slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, who? Abby Dean. Yi Hongyu did not answer his question and turned to leave the green tree. Ning Ke did not leave with her. He looked at the green leaves on the ground and his frown deepened. Yi Hongyu's last two sentences made him feel uneasy. The negotiation between the diplomatic corps of the West Hill Divine Palace and the Tang Empire continued in the side hall of the palace. The two sides had too much difference in judgment of the situation, and there was no way to find a mutually acceptable solution. It was only suitable for the situation at the table, not for the negotiation. Therefore, the two sides continued to talk. Ning Ke and Yi Hongyu were still watching the spring rain in the house by the Yanming Lake. They chatted about trivial things, testing each other's patience, and wanted to determine each other's confidence and bottom line. During this time, Crown Prince Chongming finally ascended the throne in Qingjing City and became the new emperor of the Yan Kingdom. He successfully subdued the power of Long Qing's faction and began to focus on internal affairs. The South Jin Kingdom also became peaceful. Under the powerful deterrence of the sword Garrett, especially under the influence of the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, the royal family and the military that had been restless became much more rational. The West Hill Divine Palace coalition army did not completely retreat to their respective countries. Instead, they continued to stay in Qinghe Prefecture. The Qinghe warlords provided food and logistics to maintain a sufficient deterrence to the Tang Empire. After the Tang Empire's western army retreated to the Pamir Mountains, the Yueluan Kingdom, which had suffered a military shortage for the first time in countless years, finally recognized their position. They kept a low profile, as if there was no such country in the world. The monks of the White Tower Temple began to prepare for the election of a new emperor, while the Xiankong Temple did not express any opinion. The world seemed to have gotten rid of the threat of war, but no one forgot the north. The cavalry of the Golden Palace, after surviving the cold winter in the 7 stockade villages, began to move again in the spring. The soldiers and civilians of the Tang Empire all stared at the north. Although they were vigilant, they were not as nervous as they were at the beginning of the war. As time went by, the power of the Tang Empire was gradually recovering. Smoke rose from the fields of the eastern border. The northern battlefront army's armor was brand new, and their new weapons were very sophisticated. Caravans carrying food and supplies kept going back and forth on the well-connected roads of the Tang Empire. The mines and workshops were in full swing. The curfew in Chang'an was lifted, and smiles gradually appeared on people's faces. The negotiation was a competition of patience and confidence in time. The Tang Empire never lacked confidence in this aspect. From the visible changes, it seemed that the victory was in their favor. Mo Shanshan sat by the stream, reading an old book. The eldest brother sat beside her, fishing with a fishing rod. His cotton-padded jacket gently fluttered in the breeze. It was not worried that it would break the stone chips, because according to the speed of the past few days, it would take at least a few days for Tang Xiaotang to chisel to where it was sleeping now. Song Qian and the 8th younger brother were playing chess with bandages. One hand was gently plucking the strings of the zither. That was the only hand that Bei Gong could move. Wang Qi was brewing medicine in the yard. There were all kinds of flowers and herbs piled up in the corner. After a while, the old yellow bull came in with a head full of wildflowers. The 4th brother, Fan Yu, was coughing and discussing the god-stunning array with Mu Yu. The 6th brother looked at the iron stove that had been out for many days and sighed. Those who taught were teaching, those who educated were educating, and those who were tortured were destined to continue to be tortured. The scholars were still reading, and the recuperating were still recuperating. The back of the mountain of the academy was peaceful and warm. Suddenly, the eldest brother opened his eyes. He looked at the mountain stream under the stone and slowly lifted the fishing rod in his hand. There was no hook on the line. The eldest brother never used a hook when fishing, not even a straight one. But now when he lifted the fishing rod, there were 3 grass carps on the line. The 3 grass carps were suspended in the air beside the line, struggling desperately. They were not tied to anything, but they could not break free no matter how hard they struggled. Their tails flicked, and the water droplets that were thrown out refracted the sunlight on the stream. It was very beautiful. The eldest brother shook his wrist slightly, and the 3 grass carps were finally freed and fell into the stream. He looked at the stream quietly and suddenly said to Mo Shanshan, "Take your time to read it. If there is anything you don't understand, just read it first. Ask me when I come back." Mo Shanshan's expression changed slightly. She sensed that something had happened. She closed the old book and walked to the eldest brother. She said, "I'll go with you." The eldest brother looked at her and smiled gently. He said, "It's not a big deal. It's just a little sudden." The eldest brother left the stream in a wheelchair and walked out of the clouds on the mountainside. The expression on his face was very solemn, not as calm as usual, so he arrived very quickly. Yu Lien was even faster than him. She was wearing a light yellow dress, sitting in a wheelchair and looking in the direction of Chang'an. A cold wind blew on the mountain path, stirring up layers of yellow leaves in the autumn and the hem of her dress. Yu Lien said, "I didn't expect that he would really come." The eldest brother said, "The headmaster is gone, so they can come as they like. What I don't understand is why they came." Yu Lien said, "I don't understand either. It seems that we can only ask them face to face." The eldest brother said gently and firmly, "I am the senior brother, so I should be the one asking." Yu Lien said, "Senior brother, you are really slow now, so I have to go." Someone had come to Chang'an. They didn't know who it was. The eldest brother and Yu Lien knew, so they wanted to meet him. They looked very serious and serious, even more serious than when they faced the Abbey Dean. Who was that person? I'll try to finish the next chapter before 12:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 8:22. There was a rustling sound on the mountain path. The female professor walked to eldest brother and Yu Lien, put down the broom in her hand, and patted the dust off her green gown. Her wrinkled face was full of calmness. She said, "Since you are all like this, I should go." She had not been involved in the world for many years. When the world was fighting against the Tang Empire, she could only watch silently because of her family background. However, that person had come to Chang'an today, and even she could not sit still in the classroom. At this moment, Junemo walked out of the mountain fog and said, "Stop fighting. Senior brother and junior sister have not recovered, and you are also old. It should be me." The female professor said, "How rude of you." At this moment, the 4 people present were the 4 strongest people in the academy. That person had come to Chang'an, so the academy would naturally let them receive him. However, they all knew that once he left, it would be hard to predict what would happen, so they argued. Junemo was silent. The female professor stared into his eyes and said, "Even if you are in your best condition, you are still no match for him. My sword has never asked for perfection." Junemo said, "So many people who are stronger than me still lost to me. Even Lu Bai did not take advantage of me." The female professor stopped talking when Lu Bai was mentioned, and the wrinkles on her face deepened. "Come out," Junemo said. Following these words, Zhang Nianzu and Li Guangdi walked out of the clouds. This was the first time they had walked out of the cloud gate formation alone, so they were a bit excited. However, the pool water was extremely cold, and their faces were pale. They looked extremely miserable. Junemo looked at eldest brother and Yu Lien in the wheelchair and said, "Stop fighting. I want to bring them back to Chang'an, so it is on the way to see that person. I have a reason, so I will go. Yu Lian said, why do you want to bring them back to Chang'an? Jun Mo thought for a while and said, home visit. The atmosphere in the carriage was very depressing because Jun Mo did not say anything. Zhang Nianzu and Li Guandi secretly exchanged glances and vaguely guessed that something big had happened in Chang'an. They became nervous and did not dare to talk. They kept their mouths shut and looked at the scenery outside the window. There were only spots of green in the tree branches beside the road. The two teenagers looked along the neat trees and saw the city wall of Chang'an City in the distance. At noon, the south gate of Chang'an should have been very busy. The soldiers of the city patrol department should have been carefully checking the people coming in and out. The people in the queue should have been complaining about the speed of entering the city, and the peddlers selling herbal tea and eggs could not stop drinking. However, it was unusually quiet today. In the daytime, the two heavy mountainous city gates were tightly shut. There were no pedestrians, no hawkers, no soldiers of the city patrol division, not a single person in front of the city gates. There was only one carriage. The carriage looked very ordinary. It was covered with mud and dust, and had no luster to speak of. Occasionally, a chilly spring breeze would blow off some of the dust on the carriage, revealing the dark color inside. It seemed to be made of steel, and a few smooth lines could be vaguely seen. There were no horses in the black carriage, only a single carriage. The place where the wheels touched the ground had sunk deeply, and fine gravel could be seen on both sides. Looking back, one could see that the hard stone surface of the state highway had been crushed into two very deep marks, stretching to a very far place, with no end in sight. How heavy was this carriage? How could the road be so damaged? What was more eye-catching than the carriage was the person standing beside it. Since there were no horses, could it be that he had pulled such a heavy carriage so far with his bare hands? The person was wearing an ordinary cloth gown. His eyes were ordinary, and there were a few wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. However, his skin was very delicate, and his hair was a little gray. If one looked closely, one would find that his black hair revealed a sense of youth. It was hard to tell how old he was, or whether he was young or old. A flagon was tied to the person's waist, swaying gently with the spring breeze. He seemed to be waiting for someone. Feeling a little bored, he picked up the flagon and took a sip. When he drank, his expression was very heroic, like a whale drinking seawater. He did not put down the flagon for a long time, but the flagon never reached the bottom, and there was always wine pouring out. On the city wall, countless crossbows were aimed at the drinking man, but no one dared to shoot. Because the man did not care that he was being aimed at by the powerful crossbows. He minded his own business, drinking alone in the spring breeze, as if he did not exist in this world. The man put down the flagon, wiped his mouth, and narrowed his eyes. His slightly narrowed eyes were full of intoxication, because in this life, there was nothing else he loved but wine. However, if one looked at the deepest part of his eyes, one could see that his eyes were so cold and full of vicissitudes, because in his long life, he had already seen through everything, and was long tired of this world, so he was heartless. The sound of hooves gradually slowed down, and another carriage arrived in front of the city gate. Zhang Nianzu squeezed to Li Guandi's side, and the two youths looked at the man through the window. Their bodies could not help but tremble, and their faces were extremely pale, because they seemed to see the Taoist in indigo on the street that day. Jun Mo lifted the curtain in front of the carriage, and got off. He walked in front of the man, and slowly stopped. The spring breeze caressed the empty sleeve below his right arm, his posture was gentle, but his breath was cold. The iron sword was in the sheath at his waist, and he did not pull it out. Jun Mo looked at the man beside the black carriage, and his eyes fell on the flagon at his waist. After a long silence, he bowed his head and said, "Greetings, Senior." The man was somewhat satisfied, and said, "No need to be so polite." It was a simple sentence, but it made the South City Gate tremble. This was because the man's voice was very old, extremely old, and when the air passed through his vocal cords, it was like bronze covered in dust rubbing against each other. Even if the dust and dirt were rubbed off, it was followed by the friction of the rust on the bronze, which made everyone's soul throb. Zhang Nianzu and Li Guangdi did not get off the carriage. After hearing this voice, their faces became even paler, and their bodies suddenly became as cold as ice, as if they had suddenly arrived at the age of death from their youth. Countless painful groans came from inside the city wall. The Tang soldiers who aimed at the man with crossbows were shocked by this voice, and even the moss-covered bricks of the city wall showed some signs of loosening. The city wall had withstood thousands of years of wind and rain, but it was still too young before this old voice. Jun Mo raised his head, and his expression was still calm, without any respect in his eyes. He said, "Leave, or die." The spring breeze blew again, and the flagon on the man's waist swayed again. He was a little surprised, and then became indifferent again. He looked at Jun Mo and said, "I heard that you value etiquette the most. I have already paid my respects to senior, so I don't need to be more polite." Jun Mo looked at the man and said, "Etiquette is based on respect. I paid my respects to you because of your seniority. My teacher once asked you, but it was based on the order, not you." The man slightly raised his eyebrows, and said indifferently, "Why am I not worthy of respect?" Jun Mo said, "Because you are a coward." With this sentence, the chi of heaven and earth in front of the South City Gate suddenly changed dramatically. The spring breeze turned into a bone-chilling wind. Jun Mo's empty sleeve swayed in the spring breeze, as if it had been starched too many times, suddenly stiffened, and the soft lines on the sleeve became extremely sharp lines. His right arm was broken, but he still had his sleeve. He did not draw his sword, but his sleeve was still full of sword wills. In the sudden cold spring breeze, there were countless sharp sword wills. In the carriage, Zhang Nianzu and Li Guangdi's faces became even paler, because they found that there seemed to be many sharp lines in the air, and every breath was so painful. Countless sword marks appeared in front of the man. The wine flask at his waist suddenly emitted countless clear sounds before gradually fading away. He looked at Jun Mo and said, "His taste in accepting disciples is indeed much better than ours." Jun Mo said, "My teacher is much better than you two at everything." After saying this, he stretched his left hand to his waist, held the middle of the scabbard, and held the sword horizontally in front of him. The iron sword was still at the same level as his eyebrows, and he seemed to be respectful, but in fact, he was as cold as ice. Jun Mo performed the junior salute. He held the sword horizontally in front of him, and his expression was solemn. The iron sword was square and wide, and in the wind, it was like an indestructible city wall. The shadow of the iron sword and the sleeve fell on the ground, and it was like a solemn and continuous green mountain. "You guarded the verdant canyon for 7 days, defeated Yi Su, and then injured Liu Bai. You are indeed extraordinary." The man saw Jun Mo holding the sword horizontally, and his expression became more serious. But only a little. He waved his sleeve, and the spring breeze came, lingering around him. His aura suddenly increased, and he broke through 5 states in a flash. No one knew which mountain he was on. He was not in the city, so the city wall could not stop him. He was not in the Green Mountain, so the Green Mountain could not see him. He did not want to fight, and even someone as strong as Jun Mo could not fight. What state was this? My teacher said that in terms of this state, even Buddha is not as good as you. Jun Mo's gaze passed through the sword and fell on the man. He said, "Since you don't want to fight, why are you here?" The man looked at him and said, "I came to Chang'an to return something to the academy." Jun Mo asked, "What is it?" The man said, "It's this carriage." Jun Mo said, "I have arrived. You can leave now." The man asked, "Is this carriage yours?" Jun Mo said, "No." The man said, "In that case, I am not looking for you." Jun Mo said, since it is youngest brother's carriage, I can make the decision. The man shook his head slowly, and took a sip from the flagon on his waist. He looked back at the old mottled city wall and said, "No, because you can't make the decision for this city." Junimo looked at him and did not speak. He only had one hand holding the scabbard, so he could not hold the hilt. The iron sword was pulled out of the scabbard by itself, and with a slight sound of friction, it was about to show its sharpness. At this moment, the sound of friction came from the city gate, and then it slowly opened. 2 more chapters tomorrow. Please vote for me on Monday. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 823. The city gate opened slowly and Ninkei showed up. He carried the iron cutlass on his back and held the iron pestle in his hand. He stood in the city gate and looked outside. He said, "Senior brother, since he is here for me, I will talk to him." Junimo pondered for a moment. His eyebrows were like the surface of a lake covered by the shade of willow trees. The broad and straight iron sword slowly returned to its sheath. He bowed to the man beside the carriage again and walked back to his own carriage. The carriage entered Chang'an and stopped beside Ning Quebec. Junimo looked at him and said, "Since you want to talk, you should talk nicely. Although the headmaster is no longer in the world, the academy is still here. Such a coward is not qualified to disturb us." Ninkei bowed and said calmly, "I understand." He looked at the old and dirty carriage outside the city gate. He saw the black steel walls of the carriage that had been blown away by the spring wind and the familiar seal lines. Then he looked at the man beside the carriage. Only second brother dares to say that this man is a coward. Ninkei thought to himself because he knew who this man who seemed to ignore time was. This man had appeared in the headmaster's conversation and in his dream. He once had a dream. In that dream, he came to the wilderness. Everyone in the wilderness looked up at the sky where light and darkness separated. He saw the tall figure of his teacher, a drunkard, and a butcher. Then he had another dream. That time the headmaster snatched the wine bag from the drunkard and took a sip. Then he snatched a pig leg from the butcher's back and ate it. The headmaster once mentioned in a conversation in the back of the mountain of the academy that there were 2 grand cultivators who had experienced the everlasting night. One was the drunkard and the other was the butcher. They were the 2 people in his dream. Last year, he took Sang-Sang to the wilderness in a black carriage and saw the battle between the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army and the Desolate Man. At that time, he realized that this was the place he saw in his dream. In the dream that became reality, he saw the confrontation between light and darkness in the sky. He saw the divine kingdom of light and the giant golden dragon head behind the clouds. The headmaster was indeed tall. But he did not see the drunkard or the butcher until today. The drunkard and the butcher were able to survive the long everlasting night and live eternally under the gaze of Haotian, which meant that they had the means to defeat Haotian. In the words of the headmaster, cultivation was a competition of who lived the longest. Therefore, the states of these 2 people had undoubtedly reached an unimaginable level. In the words of the headmaster, these 2 people were probably not human anymore. Among the people Ninkei knew, except for the headmaster, no one had seen the drunkard and the butcher. Perhaps only the headmaster could find them. As long as they were alive, they would be legends in the human world. The man was carrying a wine pot, but there was no pig leg on his back. Naturally, he was not the butcher. Ninkei was not an ordinary person, but he was still shocked and vigilant when looking at this man. After a while, he calmed down and asked, "Senior drunkard, what can I do for you?" The drunkard looked at him and said in a hoarse voice, "Someone asked me to return something to you." His voice was still so unpleasant to hear, as if every word carried the accumulated soil of the tombs of ancient kings and the smell of silk soaked in corpse water. Ninkei frowned slightly. Second brother had asked him what it was, but he did not ask again. Looking at the horse carriage that had accompanied him for many years and the tracks on the official road, he naturally thought of what had happened by the Sisui River. At the Sisui River, Sang Sang showed her true immortal body. She was in the dark night and stepped on the light like a white lotus. She asked the headmaster to ascend to the sky and go to the divine kingdom of Haotian together. Colorful flowers fell from the sky and shook the firmament. The headmaster and Sang Sang left there. The big black horse, the primordial 13 arrows and the big black umbrella in the black horse carriage also parted with him at the Sisui River. Ning Ke had sent people to search for them after that, but the big black horse was nowhere to be found in the wind by the Sisui River. The black horse carriage and the things in it had also disappeared. Today, one thing finally returned to the human world. Then what about the rest? The arrows? The umbrella? Where was the silly big black horse? The headmaster? And Sang Sang? Ning Ke's emotions were unstable. It took him a long time to calm down and focus on the reality. Who was it that wanted to return his things? Who was it that had the ability to find the drunkard and make him the messenger? Who is it? He looked at the drunkard and asked directly. The drunkard's response was also very direct. He did not answer. The headmaster was not in the human world. As long as he did not want to answer, no one could make him speak. The spring breeze brushed against Ning Ke's cheeks. It was not warm at all. Instead, it was extremely cold. Or maybe it was just his own body and mind that made the temperature of the spring breeze around him drop. At the Sisui River, he saw the headmaster ascending to the sky with Sang Sang. Then, the entrance of the divine kingdom of Haotian exploded and the sky was full of shooting stars. He was sure that Sang Sang was dead or had returned to the divine kingdom of Haotian. Either way, she was not in the human world anymore. If she was still here, he would have felt it. Then who took the big black horse? Who picked up the iron arrows? Who was holding the shabby big black umbrella in the human world? Who was returning the horse carriage to him? Why was it in the drunkard's hands? Ning Ke could not understand these things. Yesterday was the day that disturbed my mind. He looked up at the dim spring sun in the sky. After a moment of silence, he continued, "Why think about those who abandoned me?" Then, he looked at the drunkard and said, "Sir, please come in." It was extremely quiet in front of the southern city gate. As he said that, a tense atmosphere gushed out from the deepest part of the city wall and floated to the sky. The drunkard looked at the magnificent city wall of Chang'an and asked, "Why should I come in?" Ning Ke said, "Since I am a guest, there is no reason not to come in." The drunkard said, "As a bad guest, you should have the self-awareness not to enter the house." Ning Ke said, "A good guest and a bad guest are both guests. A guest should do as the host pleases." The drunkard found him very interesting and said with a smile, "Then I am not a guest." Ning Ke also smiled, but his real feeling was not like that. If he was not a guest, he was definitely an enemy. He looked at the drunkard and said seriously, "Since I am not entering the city, how can I return it to me?" The drunkard looked at him as if he was looking at a shameless child and said, "I am already so old and tired after such a long journey. Do I have to walk the last few steps by myself?" Ning Ke said, "Even if it is only a few steps, it is still not there." The drunkard said, "You can come out." Ning Ke said with a smile, "You can come in." The drunkard looked at the old mottled city wall of Chang'an again and said after a moment of silence, "Another day." Hearing this, Ning Ke said without hesitation, "Another day is better than another day." It was an invitation and also a gamble. To be more precise, he was gambling with his life. He was gambling with his life, the life of the entire Chang'an city, the life of the Tang Empire and the fate of the human world. This chapter is 2,000 words. I will write the next one. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 8:24. The drunkard didn't accept Ning Kei's invitation and said, "I don't want to go in today." Ning Kei raised his voice and said, "You still don't dare to go in." The drunkard's expression gradually changed. His hair, which was a mixture of white snow and black soil, was blown by the wind. He said, "For countless years, I have only been accompanied by wine and meat, and I especially like wine. Only when I am drunk can I relieve my worries. Wine can make people angry, but it can also make people feel relieved. I chose the latter, but it doesn't mean I can't choose the former." Ning Kei stared into his eyes and continued, "But you still don't dare to go in." The drunkard said, "You can come out." Ning Kei shook his head and said, "I'm timid." The drunkard said, "You dare to attack the Abbey Dean on the snowy street. How can you be timid?" Ning Kei said, "I don't dare to go out of the city, which means I'm timid." "What about you? Do you dare to go in?" The drunkard said, "This kind of talk is really boring." Ning Kei said, "Come in if you dare, come out if you dare, come up if you dare, come down if you dare. This is something that only kids do when they quarrel. It's boring and even shameful. As a junior, I can be shameful, but can you be shameful as well? Let's be straightforward and come in." This conversation was actually about different things. It looked a little funny and even cute, but who knew how many frost blades and snow swords were hidden in it? It was bone-chilling. Ning Kei's words kept moving forward. What he wanted to do was to invite the drunkard into Chang'an. Whether he accepted or not, the academy would find the opportunity they wanted in this sudden and dangerous meeting. This was the academy's plan. The drunkard only used one method to break the academy's plan. He raised the flagon and started drinking. His mouth was used for drinking, so he couldn't talk. Not talking didn't mean he refused or accepted. It was quiet in front of the southern city gate. Only the sound of the wine pouring into the drunkard's stomach could be heard. It sounded like a waterfall falling into a pond, or a gurgling stream, and finally like a river that was about to overflow. As mentioned before, the headmaster was not in the human world. So no one could make the drunkard talk, or hold his hand and invite him into the city or home. The drunkard put down the flagon. Ning Kei looked at the wine stain on the front of his robe and suddenly smiled. His smile was a little helpless, a little self-mocking, and a little gloomy. The drunkard was a grand cultivator who had survived the everlasting night. He was a senior who even the headmaster of academy once asked about Taoism. Even though he had the support of Chang'an City, it was still impossible for him to disturb the drunkard's state of mind with simple words. The smile on his face gradually disappeared. He looked at the drunkard and said, "If so, please leave the carriage here. I will send someone to pick it up later." The drunkard looked at him and said with a smile, "How can I leave without returning it to you personally?" With that, the situation in front of the city gate was suddenly reversed. Previously, Chang'an had taken the initiative. Now, it was the drunkard who challenged Chang'an. With Ning Kei's state, it should have been difficult for him to deal with it. However, he was a man who had experienced life and death and seen different worlds. His state of mind was firmer and more fearless than anyone could imagine. "I'm a coward, an idiot, a peeping Tom, I molested little girls, I'm cruel, cold, and timid. I'm just a pile of scum. Even a broom can't make me into a pile." Ning Kei looked at the drunkard and said seriously, "I'm shameless. No matter what, I won't step out of Chang'an City today. I won't come out even if you bring my wife back to life and tell me that you want to kill her." If one could maintain an indifferent attitude towards many things, emotions, and dignity, including oneself, then one would naturally be fearless. There was another saying about this attitude. Without love, there would be no fear. Without desire, there would be no demands. The drunkard understood what he meant. He knew that no matter what he did or how many people he killed, he could never force Ning Kei out of Chang'an City. Therefore, he gave up trying. This time, he left the small town where he lived in seclusion and came to Chang'an. Other than being entrusted by someone, he also wanted to see the academy after the headmaster of academy left. He wanted to see what kind of person Ning Ke was. He was not disappointed. The headmaster of academy's choice of students was indeed not disappointing. Therefore, he was a little disappointed. Because the world seemed to be walking on the same track as before. Because he was a little disappointed, he sighed and patted the horse carriage beside him. His action was very casual. His palm fell softly without any additional force. The horse carriage suddenly became shorter. That was because the wheels made of stainless steel all sank into the hard ground. Then, under the terrifying counterforce, the carriage suddenly jumped up into the air. This horse carriage was a relic of Master Yen Sei. It was made of stainless steel and was extremely heavy. If the talisman array was not turned on like this, it would break into pieces. Such a heavy carriage was patted into the air by the drunkard, as if he was patting a ball. The drunkard waved his sleeves. The spring wind was slightly chaotic. The heavy steel carriage, like a giant stone thrown by a catapult, roared toward the city gate. Ning Ke held the array pestle tightly. Countless vigorous chi of heaven and earth gushed out from the city gate and poured into his body through the array pestle. It instantly filled up his snow mountain and ocean of chi, providing him with endless psyche power and strength. Bang! He pulled out his cutlass and cut the spring wind. The iron cutlass chopped on the carriage. The black carriage suddenly stopped and hung in the spring wind in front of the city gate. The first spring thunder of this year exploded in front of the southern city of Chang'an. Several light cyan airflows spread out from the point where the iron cutlass and the carriage touched. In a flash, the cyan airflows expanded to a radius of dozens of feet, looking like several light shields. Ning Ke and the black carriage were right in the center of the cyan light shield. The cyan light shield only lasted for a very short time and then broke with a slight sound. Countless fragments of the chi of heaven and earth sprayed around. The trees outside the city gate were broken before they could sprout green buds. The gravel on the state highway shot away like arrows. The city wall had withstood thousands of years of wind and rain, and its surface had traces of weathering. After such a terrible shock, countless green bricks peeled off and fell down like a rainstorm. The wind stopped and the dust settled. The green bricks on the city wall became more mottled, but no obvious damage could be seen. On the contrary, the green bricks that were cut off by the aura were extremely smooth, as if they were new bricks. After all, it was impossible to shake Chang'an city. Interesting. The drunkard looked at the city wall and said. Then he looked at Ning Ke and said, "But you are not interesting. You know, there are many things that I haven't done for thousands of years, but it doesn't mean that I can't do them." Ning Ke put away his cutlass. The black carriage finally fell to the ground with a heavy thud. He looked at the drunkard and said, "I was just kidding. Did you take it seriously?" He was smiling when he said this, although he was annoyed at the moment. Because he had to smile. Sometimes, only a smile could prove his strength. Then he started coughing and took half a step back inadvertently. He turned his body slightly and held the hilt and the array pestle tightly. One of his hands was as cold as ice, and the other was as hot as flowing lava. "I said you are not interesting because you can't do it." The drunkard looked at him and said, "No one can do it after your headmaster left." Ning Ke knew that he couldn't do it because he couldn't leave Chang'an. But his headmaster could take the eldest brother to travel around many countries in an ox cart for many years. The most important thing is that it's not up to you to decide whether you can write that character or not. The drunkard seemed to be really disappointed, and his eyebrows were slightly furrowed. Ning Ke wanted to salvage something, so he said, "At least I have written it. You dare not enter the city is the proof." The drunkard said, "No matter how big Chang'an is, it is just a city after all. It is still too small compared to the world. Ning Ke said, "One day, I will leave Chang'an." The drunkard said, "Even if you have the courage, you can't turn the whole world into Chang'an. We are all part of this world, so how can we change the world? Your headmaster can't do it, I can't do it, and neither can Chen Mao. How can you do it?" Ning Ke couldn't answer. The negotiation between the academy and the divine hall was in a stalemate, and it was a very delicate and critical moment. At this moment, the drunkard, a hidden powerhouse who could change the situation of the world, must have a purpose. The academy and the Tang Empire didn't want to see that kind of change. "I don't understand why you came to Chang'an." Ning Ke looked at the drunkard's eyes and said. Even if the academy or he couldn't change the relationship between Haotian and the human world, the drunkard shouldn't be here. He looked at the drunkard's eyes and said seriously, "In my dream, you and the butcher are both looking at me. It means that just like the moment before, there is still hope for you. Dreams are often the opposite of reality." The drunkard said. Ning Ke said, "The headmaster said that you and the butcher both experienced the last everlasting night. If so, it means that even Haotian couldn't do anything to you. Why did you show up? Why did you come to Chang'an? I've drunk too much these years, and I'm usually drunk. I often don't know if I'm in a dream or reality. But even in a dream, I've never dreamt about the night." The drunkard looked at him and said, "Because that's what I'm most afraid of. In the long everlasting night, countless people died. No one could retain such a long memory. Only the drunkard and the butcher had that seemingly endless cold and dark memory. It was understandable that they were afraid. After that day, the moon suddenly appeared in the night. The butcher and I were surprised, especially when the moon didn't disappear. That's probably what you said before, the hope I once had." The drunkard said, "We also thought that we could keep watching. Even though it's annoying to hide, it shouldn't be a problem for us to hold on for another few hundred years. But unfortunately, things don't always go our way." Ning Ke felt cold and asked, "Has Haotian found you?" The drunkard said, "Yes." Ning Ke kept silent for a long time and murmured, "He couldn't find you for thousands of years. Why did he find you now?" The drunkard didn't answer him. He looked up at the blue sky and thought, when he was in the sky, he was too far away from the ground. It was hard for him to find us. But if he comes to the human world, where can we hide? Everything was settled. Ning Ke felt very tired. "I'm short of 1,000 words today. It's just that the plot is broken here. I'll make it up before the end of the month. Now I'm short of 4,000 words. Remember. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 825. If so, why didn't you do anything when the headmaster was still alive? Second brother was right. Compared to the headmaster and youngest uncle, you are all cowards. But cowards are better than dogs. Ning Ke looked at the drunkard and said. There were actually 3 questions in this simple sentence. They were like 3 knives and 3 hot slaps on the face. The drunkard's expression did not change. He said, if you reach a certain state in cultivation, you will understand that emotions like honor and disgrace are meaningless. Then what's meaningful? Eternity is the only meaning of life, or the only goal that we should pursue. The drunkard looked at the sky and said, in order to reach the other side, to achieve this goal and to fulfill the meaning of life, we are willing to pay any price. Why should we be afraid of being dogs? You should be glad that it was me and not the butcher who showed up outside Chang'an today. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened? Ning Ke said, since you are dogs, you should have been watchdogs in West Hill. This sentence was harsh, but the drunkard's expression did not change. He said calmly, the premise of eternity is existence, and the premise of existence is self. This is what we insist on. Ning Ke understood something from this conversation. He asked, "Is this the promise you got?" The drunkard did not answer his question. He pointed at the carriage in front of the city gate and said, "This is for you." At the same time, someone asked me to tell you something. Ning Ke asked, "What is it?" The drunkard said. He looked calm and even a little dull. It was obvious that he had memorized it, without any of his own understanding or feelings. Then he turned around and left. The flagon swayed in the spring breeze, which reminded Ning Ke of the wooden dipper on the eldest brother's waist. Even the way he walked was very similar to the eldest brother. One year in the back of the mountain of the academy, the eldest brother was walking on the mountain path in front of him. He seemed to be walking very slowly, but Ning Ke could not catch up with him no matter how hard he tried. He looked at the back of the drunkard and his face was a little pale. He was shocked and did not pay attention to what the drunkard had told him before he left. After several months of war, the Tang Empire and the Academy finally stabilized the situation at great cost. They even saw a bright future. However, at this moment, the drunkard and the butcher, who had been living in seclusion for countless years, appeared. The situation of the world was bound to undergo drastic changes because of this, and the bright road ahead suddenly dimmed. It started to rain in the clear sky. The spring rain was bone-chilling. Ning Ke looked up at the gray sky and remained silent for a long time. He walked into the black carriage and saw a black box in the corner. The black box was very familiar. Even though it was slightly deformed, he still couldn't forget it. This was because the item inside the box had accompanied him through thousands of mountains and rivers, defeating countless powerful enemies. He stretched out his finger and gently stroked the edge of the black box, causing wrinkles to appear in the dust. Then, he gently opened the box. The iron bow was still there, and the sharp arrowhead gleamed coldly, as if it had been waiting for him. The black carriage came to the shore of Yanming Lake. The horses that were urgently transferred to pull the carriage looked extremely tired. The spring rain washed away a lot of the dust on the walls of the carriage, but the array glyphs were still not activated. Lu Yiqing had been guarding the courtyard gate with his sword in his arms. Hearing the sound of the wheels rolling on the ground, he slowly stood up. Ning Ke carried the black box out of the carriage and walked towards the courtyard. Lu Yiqing suddenly felt a frightening murderous intent. The white cloth covering his eyes had been wet by the spring rain, but it suddenly became dry. He couldn't help but feel shocked, and his right hand suddenly grasped the hilt of his sword. Ning Ke didn't even look at him and just walked past him. He didn't care that the powerhouse in the knowing destiny state from the sword garret might pull out his sword at any time. His expression was so calm that it was frightening. Lu Yiqing couldn't pull out his sword because there were cracks on his wrists, and blood oozed out like cracked earth. The white cloth covering his eyes was torn and fell with the cold wind in the rain. Ning Ke walked into the small courtyard by the Yanming Lake. Lu Yiqing held the hilt of his sword and lowered his head. Blood kept dripping from his wrists, and together with the rain falling from the eaves, it made a slight pitter-patter. What a terrible murderous intent and anger. No one could see that Ning Ke was angry with the naked eye, and there was no murderous intent in his eyes. At this moment, he was like an abandoned well that no one cared about. He was so quiet that no one could see how deep he was. Yi Hongyu was looking at the plum blossoms in the rain under the porch, holding a bowl of tea in her hand. Ning Ke walked to her and asked, "You know about this?" Yi Hongyu put the bowl of tea on the stone window and said, "Just like you, I just found out." Ning Ke said, "You once told me that the academy would definitely change its mind." Yi Hongyu said, "Someone told me that." Ning Ke asked, "Who?" Yi Hongyu said, "The person who asked me to come to Chang and to negotiate with the academy on behalf of the Divine Hall is naturally the hierarch." Ning Ke said, "The hierarch lord is already a useless person. Or you are telling the truth." Yi Hongyu looked at him and said, "But after the hierarch lord returned to the Divine Hall, no one has seen him again." So even if he is already a useless person, his words are still effective. What he said makes sense. The Academy's attitude will change. Ning Ke walked to the stone window and looked at the plum blossoms that grew more and more lively in the spring rain. He said, but the Divine Hall should know what to do. Yi Hongyu looked at his back and said, compared to the sins of the Tangs, the Divine Hall's request is not too much. Ning Ke did not turn around and said, it is impossible to go to the Divine Hall to ask for forgiveness. The Tangs care about their reputation. This can be removed. Yi Hongyu said, other than what we said last time, the Divine Hall also asked for your little emperor to abdicate and that Her Majesty must leave Chang'an. You know why? Ning Ke was silent for a moment. The plum blossoms in front of him gradually turned from lively to tired under the rain. He said, you should know very well that when there is no way out, you have to fight with your life. Yi Hongyu said, you still have a way out. The Li family still has a prince. Ning Ke looked at the plum blossoms and said, I'll *CK your mother. His voice was calm and his tone was gentle, but it revealed a very firm determination. Yi Hongyu's expression did not change. She said, my mother is already dead. Ning Ke turned around and looked at her. He said, then I'll *CK you. Yi Hongyu said, Haotian did not give the Academy too much time to consider. I think what you need to do now is not to vent your anger and fear, but to discuss with others. Ning Ke stared at her eyes for a long time and then turned to leave. Yi Hongyu stood by the stone window and was silent for a moment. Then she picked up the remaining tea. The golden tea in the bowl rippled. It was not because of the spring rain, but because her hands were a little unsteady. This was the most dangerous Ning Ke she had ever seen. Although he did not seem to do anything, with a calm expression and a steady tone, he was actually on the verge of exploding with anger. If she couldn't calm him down, then Ning Ke might really use the power of the God-stunning array to kill her or rape her at all costs. This is 2,000 words. I will write another 5,000 words today. As for that sentence, please don't accuse me of keeping you in suspense. It is because I have thought about it for a few days and still could not figure out how to say it. I have already determined the content and purpose, but I need the right words. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 826. After leaving Yanming Lake, Ning Ke did not go to the palace directly. Instead, he went to the building of pines and cranes for a drink. He did not drink much, and then he took a walk along Vermilion Bird Avenue. He did not walk far, letting the spring rain fall on his head, face, and body. Fortunately, the spring rain was gentle and his clothes were not very wet. He gradually calmed down and accepted the infuriating changes of the situation for the Tang Empire and the Academy. He came to Sanyuanli. His neighbors were preparing dinner. The smell of cooking oil mixed with the smell of burning firewood. It smelled good and made him feel calmer. He stood at the stone steps in front of the courtyard and waited. After a while, the door of the courtyard was opened with a squeak. Second brother walked out, and then there was a squeak in the night. Ning Ke bowed to the night and the stone steps and said, the drunkard and Haotian must have been promised by Haotian that they could live forever with self-consciousness. That's why they chose to obey. Jun Mo said, they can't survive the second everlasting night. That's their biggest fear. Someone in the courtyard lit up the street. The night faded and 2 wheelchairs appeared. Yu Lian said, the kingdom of Haotian will never allow self-consciousness to exist. Jun Mo said, the wisdom of a coward is no match for the stupidity of a brave man. Eldest brother did not participate in the discussion of his younger brothers and sisters. He looked at the night sky quietly, at the bright moon behind the rain clouds, as if he was looking at the kingdom of Haotian that would never return. Jun Mo looked at Ning Ke and said, sometimes anger can bring courage, but most of the time it is meaningless. Yu Lian looked at Ning Ke and said, "Now that you have calmed down, let's continue." Ning Ke understood what his senior brother and senior sister meant and asked, "How?" Yu Lian said, "You can talk however you want." Ning Ke recalled that he and the Empress had said something similar and looked a little bitter. Eldest brother withdrew his gaze from the night sky and looked at him with a smile. "Little brother, do your best, okay?" It was very quiet in the main hall. Even the light from the candles seemed a little cold. All the eunuchs and palace maids were isolated far away. Only the Empress and Ning Ke were in front of the table. The Empress looked at the letter with a yellow cover on the table and did not speak. Ning Ke looked at the summary dossier of the West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic corps and remained silent. However, he could not remain silent forever. Are there really cultivators who have survived the everlasting night? The Empress looked at Ning Ke and asked. She still found it unbelievable. Ning Ke thought for a while and said, "A sage appears every 1,000 years. The drunkard and the butcher have been cultivating in the world for thousands of years." Even though he did not show his divinity outside the city, his state must be beyond the imagination of most ordinary people. In other words, worldly martial arts means nothing to him. The Empress frowned slightly and asked, "Who is stronger, the drunkard or the Abbey Dean?" Ning Ke thought for a while and said, "The drunkard may be in a higher state, but his strength is not as strong as the Abbey Dean." The Empress was puzzled and asked, "Why is it like this?" He and the butcher have been walking in the darkness for countless years. Both their bodies and bodies have decayed. The Abbey Dean has always been walking in the light. With the departure of the headmaster, he has reached his peak. Ning Ke said, "If either the drunkard or the butcher dares to walk into Chang'an, I have 70% confidence to kill them. Even if they enter Chang'an together, I still have 10% confidence." The Empress said, 10% confidence is basically the same as no confidence at all. Ning Ke said, "If it were other cultivators, it would be correct. But since they are facing the drunkard and the butcher, 10% confidence is 100% confidence because they are afraid of death." The Empress said, "How can a grand cultivator with such an unfathomable state not see through life and death?" The headmaster once said that cultivation is about time. The longer you live, the more powerful you will be. But the longer you live, the more afraid you will be of death. Eternal life is the greatest temptation, and death is the greatest fear. Ning Ke said, "The drunkard and the butcher are two such people. That is why they surrendered to Haotian. And it is also because of this that they dare not step into Chang'an." The Empress' eyes brightened and said, "Then outside the city? If the two senior brothers and senior sister are in their peak state, maybe we can give it a try." Ning Ke thought of the flagon swaying in the spring breeze. He shook his head and said, "The problem now is that maybe no one can find or catch up with the two." The light in the Empress' eyes gradually faded and she said, "That means the drunkard and the butcher are two big knives hanging over the Tang people's heads, and they can fall at any time." Ning Ke said, "The West Hill Divine Palace dares to make these conditions because of this." The Empress looked at the briefing file on the table and said after a moment of silence, "The existence of the drunkard and the butcher must be a secret. No one can know about it." Ning Ke understood what the Empress meant. The Tang Empire had just come out of desperation. The people's confidence was gradually recovering, and the morale of the army was high. The southern battlefront army had fought so hard, but they still refused to completely block the verdant canyon, because everyone was waiting for the day to counterattack. If the Tang people knew about the existence of the drunkard and the butcher, their morale would definitely be seriously affected. A war without the possibility of counterattack would be endless torture for everyone. Ning Ke looked into the Empress' eyes and said, "How do the Imperial Court and the Academy explain the agreement with the West Hill Divine Palace? The land ceded by the Tang Empire and the war reparations will definitely be known by people." The Empress smiled and said, "Humiliation brings courage and anger. If there is a way to release the anger, then the purest courage will be left. Ning Ke felt that the Empress's smile was beautiful, but somehow he felt cold. How could he let the Tang people completely release the anger brought by the humiliation of the agreement? He didn't want to think further, and he felt that he was thinking too much. The people can hide it for the time being, but the ministers in the court must know the truth. The academy doesn't want the court to fall into chaos again because of this. Since they are supported by the people, they should bear the mental pressure for the people at this time. The Empress thought for a while and agreed with him. She rang the little golden bell on the table. It didn't take long for more than 10 of the most important ministers to come to the night hall. The ministers were a little tired after entering the palace in the middle of the night. But thinking that the palace was urging them so urgently, they were afraid that the war in the northern borderline had started again, or the negotiation with the West Hill Divine Palace had gone wrong. They didn't dare to be negligent. Even though they had thought that the situation was very bad, they still didn't expect that the news waiting for them in the palace would be so terrible. For a moment, the night hall was silent. "We can agree to any other conditions," a tired voice sounded in the hall. It was General Xu Qing who had just returned to Chang'an. The expression of the general was very sorrowful because he knew that this treaty would be an indelible humiliation for the Tang Empire. Every single one of those conditions was like a thorn whipping his heart. But those conditions could be agreed to. Under such a serious situation, the Tang Empire had no other choice. But one of the conditions proposed by the West Hill Divine Palace was unacceptable. He looked at the Empress and Ning Ke and said word by word, "We can't give up the Xiangwan Plain." The western army of the Tang Empire withdrew from the Pamir Mountains and most of them joined the northern army under the command of General Su Qi. They were prepared for the possible war with the Golden Tribe cavalry in late spring. General Xu Qing returned to Chang'an so that Su Qi could lead the two armies. At the same time, the military ministry of Chang'an needed a powerful general. He objected to the ceding of the Xiangwan Plain not because the military couldn't bear the humiliation, but because of the importance of the Xiangwan Plain. The Xiangwan Plain was located in the south of the 7 stockade villages in the northern borderline of the Tang Empire. It was a natural grassland that stretched for thousands of miles. It was the most suitable place for raising horses, and it was also the main source of the Tang Empire's warhorses. One of the important reasons why the Tang Empire's cavalry could dominate the world was that the Xiangwan Plain had been providing the best warhorses for thousands of years. The most important condition of the West Hill Divine Palace's negotiation was to cede the Xiangwan Plain on behalf of the Golden Tribe Royal Court, which was absolutely unacceptable to the Tang Empire. Last autumn, the Golden Tribe Royal Court's cavalry invaded the south like a pack of wolves. The Tang Empire's internal strife was still ongoing. The cavalry that followed His Majesty to the wilderness was trapped in Helan City. The northern army was seriously unprepared and the 7 stockade villages were defeated one after another. However, even under such a serious situation, General Su Qi never thought of retreating. The northern army paid an unimaginable price and finally stopped the Golden Tribe cavalry from advancing 100 miles to the south of the 7 stockade villages. Why? Because the Tang Empire had to keep the Xiangwan Plain. The horse farm was the foundation of the Tang Empire's prosperity for thousands of years. It was the foundation of the Tang Empire's army. It could even be said that the Xiangwan Plain was the Tang Empire. The Golden Tribe Royal Court's cavalry was the Tang Empire's greatest enemy. If the Xiangwan Plain was ceded, the Golden Tribe Royal Court would definitely become more powerful, and the Tang Empire would become weaker. A civil official said in confusion, "Compared to ceding Dongshan County, this grassland is nothing. Even if we lose some warhorses, we can always get them back from the Golden Tribe in the future." Even at this moment, the officials of the Tang Empire still had a strong sense of optimism and confidence. Xu Qing said coldly, "The divine halls of West Hill want us to pay for the warhorses and cede the Xiangwan Plain. In the future, even if the Tang Empire has good armors and weapons, it will have no mounts. How can we get them back?" Since they have made such a plan, they will not leave any loopholes. They are trying to destroy the foundation of the Tang Empire. He was most worried that the Empress and the Academy did not understand the importance of the Xiangwan Plain. He looked at Ning Ke and said sternly, if we cede the Xiangwan Plain to the Golden Tribe Royal Court, the Tang Empire will not be far from being destroyed. The Empress looked at Ning Ke and said, if we cede the Xiangwan Plain, the Tang Empire will not be able to recover within 100 years. The divine halls of West Hill must be aware of this. That's why they made such a request. Ning Ke looked at the files on the table and did not make a decision for a long time. There is a chapter of 2,000 words left. Try to finish it before 2:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 827. Ning Ke had lived in the city of Wei for many years and naturally knew the importance of the Xiangwan Plain. The war in the human world was divided into two sides. The Academy would fight against the drunkard and the butcher, and the sage of sword Lu Bai and the reclusive sublime beings of Taoism. The rest of the enemies would be wiped out by the Tang cavalry. The cavalry of the Tang Empire was the strongest cavalry in the world. As long as they adapted to the battlefield, they could directly kill all the cultivators in the 5 regions. What happened in the Verdant Canyon would not happen again, because there was no second academy in the world, and no one in the back mountain of the academy. If the Tang Empire really agreed to the conditions of the West Hill Divine Palace and ceded the Xiangwan Plain to the Golden Tribe Royal Court, it would be equivalent to cutting off its own arms and giving up its most powerful weapon. No matter what, Ning Ke should not have agreed to this condition. But he was clear about the key point of the Divine Halls of West Hill's negotiation, and even the real purpose of the drunkard's appearance in Chang and was Xiangwan Plain. The night hall was silent. Everyone, including the Empress, was waiting for him to express his attitude. Because at this time, the attitude of the Academy was equal to the attitude of the Tang Empire. Ning Ke stood up, looked at the ministers and said, let's talk to them first. I'll think about it. No one could make a decision in such a short period of time. That night, Ning Ke returned to the house by the Yanming Lake, but he did not look for Yi Hongyu. Early in the morning, the sound of chickens and dogs barking could be heard in the streets. Before the steamed bun shop opened its doors, a hot mist seeped out from the cracks in the door. The mist was blown by the morning wind and landed on the street, wetting the stone slabs. A new day dawned. The imperial court continued to negotiate with the diplomatic corps of the West Hill Divine Palace. According to the news from the palace, the Divine Hall seemed to be very tough, which was different from a few days ago, especially when it came to the cession of the Xiangwan Plain. Ning Ke understood where the Divine Hall's confidence came from. He waved his hand to let the official of the Imperial Center Administration leave. He got up and had a bowl of porridge. Then he came to the plum garden, pushed open the door and walked in. Yi Hongyu liked to take a bath in the morning because she liked to spend every day refreshed. When Ning Ke walked into her room, she had just come out of the shower. Her wet, black hair fell over her bare shoulders, the ends dripping with water, covering her breasts. Yi Hongyu glanced at him and walked to the bronze mirror to comb her hair. She asked, "Have you decided?" As she combed her hair, her black hair was combed from the front to the back, and it could be seen clearly in the mirror. Ning Ke asked, "Decide what?" Yi Hongyu said, "Sign it." Ning Ke shook his head. Yi Hongyu saw him shake his head in the mirror and her hand that was holding the comb stiffened. She said, "I thought you had made up your mind, so I was unhappy and wanted to rape me." Ning Ke said, "Although you are very beautiful." Yi Hongyu said, "Even thinking about it, it's not a good thing." Ning Ke said, "At least I haven't thought about it." Yi Hongyu said, "I am not wearing any clothes, but you are staring at me. What are you thinking about?" Ning Ke said, "This is my home. Besides, I've already seen you naked in the swamp in the wasteland. Yi Hongyu asked calmly, I've never asked you before. Does it look good? Ning Ke thought for a while and said, your body is indeed very attractive, but I have no interest in your gown of judgment and the money under your skin. Yi Hongyu got up and put on the blood-colored robe of judgment. She began to draw her eyebrows in front of the mirror. The robe of judgment was a combination of holiness and coldness. It looked even more attractive when it covered her delicate white jade-like body. Ning Ke knew that there was nothing under the robe. She did not wear the maidservant dress because she was the great divine priest of judgment. The Tang Empire cannot keep the Xianwan plain. The divine hall can make concessions in any aspect, but not the Xianwan plain. Otherwise, the war against the Tang Empire will be meaningless. She said as she drew her eyebrows. Ning Ke looked at the charcoal pencil that was drawing between her eyebrows and said, life is not for. Before he could finish, Yi Hongyu said, people in the academy live for meaning, but more people live for meaning. The divine hall has to give an explanation to all the countries in the world. Ning Ke said, I think the other conditions are enough. Yi Hongyu put down the eyebrow pencil and took out a piece of red rouge paper from her makeup box. She looked at Ning Ke in the mirror and said, then how will the divine hall explain to itself and Haotian? She gently pursed her lips, which were as bright as red plums. Then she turned around and looked at Ning Quebec. She tore the rouge paper in her hand into two. We all understand that when the Tang Empire and the Academy recover, any agreement will be useless. We can't let the Tang Empire continue to be powerful. Therefore, the Xianwan Plain must be ours. The West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic corps was still tough. The officials of the Tang Empire who participated in the negotiation were in a very passive position. Perhaps some hot-blooded young official leaked the news, but the details of the negotiation and the humiliating conditions from the Divine Hall were gradually known by the people of the Tang Empire. In particular, the two conditions of ceding the Xianwan Plain and Dongshan Commandery made the Tang people extremely angry. The Tang Empire had never been so humiliated in thousands of years. From the northern borderline to capital Cheng, from the Pamir Mountains to the Vermilion Bird Avenue, countless people from the Tang Empire had died in this war before the situation was finally reversed. They did not lose the war. Why did they have to sign such a humiliating treaty? For a moment, the whole city was in an uproar. The hawkers were not in the mood. The hot and sour noodle slice soup seemed to have lost some of its flavor. They were not in the mood to do anything. Who could sit at home peacefully? Countless citizens, students, and injured soldiers who had retired from the front line spontaneously came to the square in front of the palace. No one made any trouble or even made any noise. Thousands of people just stood outside the palace in silence. They stood in the cold spring rain until late at night and still did not disperse. Thousands of people gathered together, but there was no sound. The silence outside the palace was an indescribable pressure for the people inside. The officials who knew the inside story suddenly aged a lot. Many people were waiting that night, and some were doing other things. It was not that they did not have the anger of the ordinary Tang people, but because they had to start thinking about the future. At the back of the mountain of the academy, Muyu carried a wooden basket and walked among the clouds on the mountainside. Every once in a while, she would take out a small flag from the basket and stick it in the soil or between the mountain rocks. The tactical array of the cloud gate was taught to her by the headmaster of the academy. It was an important protective array for the back of the mountain. When she was in the verdant canyon, there was no one to control the tactical array. It was broken by the hierarch of the West Hill Divine Palace and was severely damaged. Although the Abbey Dean was seriously injured now, the drunkard and the butcher were like new dark clouds hanging over the hearts of the disciples of the academy. She had to hurry to repair them so that she could be at ease. The blacksmith house by the stream was still quiet. The sixth brother leaned on the iron hammer and looked at the forest at night in a daze. A gentle voice came from the room behind him from time to time. One is limitless, and the other is almost immortal. It seems that no one can kill them as long as they don't enter Chang'an. But I always remember what the headmaster said. The eldest brother gently moved his fingers in the yellow sand of the river and mountain sandbox and said gently, except for Haotian, there is no omniscient and omnipotent person in the world. In this case, they must be killed. So we should start to calculate now. I think it will be a very complicated work. The fourth brother said, I'd like to discuss it with you. Yu Lian sat on the edge of the cliff and meditated. Her fingers wrote in the wind from time to time. Tang Xiaotang widened the stone steps on the steep mountain road. The blood-red giant knife in her hand became more and more like a big iron stick. The little white wolf was lying on the stone steps above, bored. The wind suddenly rose among the cliffs and went straight to the night sky. It blew away the clouds and revealed the bright moon. The little white wolf began to howl at the bright moon. But its voice was still tender without any momentum. Jun and Mo stood by the pool. Zhang San and Li Si welcomed the washing of the waterfall. He was comprehending the swordsmanship. The big white goose beside him washed its feet in the pool water. The little white wolf's howl came from the cliff. The big white goose raised its head and looked at the cliff contemptuously. Then it bent its neck and sang to the moon. Quack! At this time, Ning Ke was standing on the corner tower of the imperial city. He looked at the bright moon in the night sky and the dense but quiet crowd under the city. He seemed to hear something and then remembered something. He laughed. Good night. See you tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 828. Ning Ke looked into the Empress's eyes and said, shame brings courage and anger. If the anger can be released, the rest will be courage. These are your words. Now we need to consider who will bear the anger of the Tangs. The Empress did not answer. Ning Ke continued, after we cede the Xianwan plain, the academy will solve the problem of the warhorses. The Empress shook her head and said, no matter how strong the academy is, it can't create something out of nothing. Ning Ke said, I will take back everything I lost in the future. The Empress did not understand where his confidence came from, but was finally convinced by his firm tone. After thinking for a moment, she said seriously, in that case, I will sign it. Ning Ke said, you can't sign it, because we can't let you and His Majesty bear the anger of the people. The Empress said, but you once said that the Academy can't sign it, because this agreement will be reneged. Ning Ke said, the West Hill Divine Palace is well prepared. They will definitely ask me or even my senior brother to sign it. As for the Imperial Court, Yi Hongyu is right. We still have a way out. The Empress was extremely smart and immediately understood what he meant. She disagreed and said, the one sitting on the throne is my son, so I have to bear the corresponding responsibilities and obligations. It makes no difference whether I or anyone else in the Li family sign it. At least it can form a buffer. Ning Ke said, as a member of the Li royal family, you have to sign your name on such a humiliating treaty. Only death can appease the anger of the people. And in this situation, you cannot die, Empress. The Academy has entered the human realm. Mr. First promised to educate my son, and there will be no more disputes in the Imperial Court. In fact, if I think about it carefully, it is no longer important to the Tang Empire. The Empress smiled and said, and for me now, death is really not scary. Ning Ke naturally could not push the Empress to the front. He left the palace that night and went to the prince's mansion. The candlelight in the study was dim. Li Peiyan still looked handsome and amiable, but there were more wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. His once sharp eyebrows had also become very soft. I've never had any big ambitions in my life. I just want to help my brother make up for his shortcomings and represent the royal family to ease the relationship between the royal family and the Tao sect. At most, I want to be a virtuous king who will leave his name in history." Li Peiyan looked at Ning Ke and said with a self-deprecating smile, "Now that I think about it, if I wasn't born into the emperor's family, I believe I would be more useful than I am now. This is where His Highness's problem lies." Ning Ke said, "In this great era, your thoughts are too trivial. Moreover, you have given in too much to the divine hall. His Majesty doesn't like it, the Academy doesn't like it, and the people don't like it either." Li Peiyan said, "It seems that I really am useless." Ning Ke said, "This image suits the role that His Highness is going to play. Therefore, I think before you leave this world, you can still make some contributions to the Tang Empire and the royal family." Li Peiyan looked at the candlestick on the table and the dripping candlelight. He sighed and said, "After you killed Xiaohu, you have never paid attention to my existence. I always thought that the Academy put pressure on you for the sake of my brother, or that you have killed enough people and your resentment has dissipated, or that you just want me to fall into the fear of dying. I didn't expect that you are waiting for me here. No one can calculate what will happen years or even decades later like Haotian, and I can't think so far ahead. It's just like what third senior sister once said, some people are more useful alive than dead. Useful in, dying at the right time. Yes. Ning Ke, you are indeed the most cold-blooded person in the world." Li Peiyan sighed and praised, "Now that the Tang Empire is in a precarious situation, it needs a cold-blooded and realistic person like you to protect it." Ning Ke said, "Everyone has the right to say that I am cold-blooded, but His Highness doesn't." It was a sleepless night, not because he tossed and turned, but because he wandered around Chang'an. Ning Ke left the prince's mansion and returned to his house by Yanming Lake. He went to see Yi Hongyu and said directly, "The Academy and the royal family cannot go to the West Hill Divine Palace to apologize to Haotian." Yi Hongyu said, "Yes, you can send a delegation." Ning Ke said, "No." Yi Hongyu thought for a while and said, "Let's do what we did in the South Jin Kingdom. Let the House of Red Sleeves go to the Divine Hall to perform." Ning Ke said, "That might work, but they must not have any official status, and I have to ask for their opinion first." Yi Hongyu said, "Continue." Ning Ke said, "We can agree to all other conditions, but the Divine Hall must guarantee the absolute safety of the Great River Kingdom. Whether it is the Yueluan Kingdom or the South Jin Kingdom, as long as they cross the Great River, it will be considered as breaking the contract." Yi Hongyu said, "No problem. In return, the Tang Empire must also guarantee the safety of Qinghe Prefecture." Ning Ke said, "This is in the Divine Hall's condition." Yi Hongyu shook her head and said, "It is the safety of everyone in Qinghe Prefecture, including the people of Qinghe who stayed in Chang'an during the war. The Tang Empire must release them." Ning Ke said, "It seems that this is the condition that the Qinghe warlords proposed when they surrendered to the Divine Hall." Yi Hongyu said, "If the Divine Hall can't even do this, how can they win the trust of the billions of believers in the world?" Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, "I promise you, once the treaty is signed, as long as the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army leaves Qinghe Prefecture, I will send the people in the Qinghe Guild Hall back." In the early morning, the spring rain fell again, and the dust fell to the ground. The Tang Empire agreed to most of the demands made by the West Hill Divine Palace. Prince Li Peiyan solemnly signed his name on the treaty, and at the same time, wrote his name on the pillar of shame in history. When the news spread, there was an uproar in the imperial court. No one knew what had happened in this long night, and why the bigwigs in the palace dared to sign the treaty, even though they would be condemned by the whole world. The Tangs gathered in front of the imperial palace could no longer control their emotions. They cursed angrily and spat at the red palace wall. Then, some old rumors spread among the crowd. Those old rumors were not actually rumors, but things that everyone knew. For example, the massacre of the village in the Yen territory, the close relationship between the prince and the West Hill Divine Palace hierarch, and the murder of a certain Taoist sect in Chang'an. That was why he was demoted to a commoner by the former emperor, and his title was only restored when Li Huiyuan ascended to the throne. The palace gate opened slowly, and Li Peiyan walked towards the crowd. He wore a dark robe with black and red embroidery with gold. It was especially eye-catching in the light spring rain that fell in the early morning. Countless people looked at him, their eyes full of contempt and anger. Some even tried to rush over and beat him up. A low-ranking official in the Yamen asked painfully why the imperial court ceded Dongshan County and Xiangwan Plain. The official's voice was really painful, as if he was bleeding. Countless people were questioning and scolding. Did the imperial court not want to take back Qinghe prefecture? Why did they send the traitors in the Qinghe guild hall back? The front of the palace was full of voices with the smell of blood. If it were not for the heavy protection of the Yulin royal guards, Li Peiyan would have been torn to pieces by now. Li Peiyan suddenly stopped and looked around at the sea of angry people. His expression was calm, but the expression in the depths of his eyes was very complicated. The crowd gradually quieted down. Why? There is not so much reason in the world. The Tang Empire needs time, and I will buy time for you. The Tang Empire needs peace, and I will fight for peace for you. If the whole world attacks the Tang Empire, what will the Tang Empire do? Can it really be the enemy of the world? If you think that I am wrong, prove it to me in the future. His expression was very indifferent, but his hands in his sleeves kept trembling. Li Peiyan returned to the prince's mansion. The angry people surrounded the prince's mansion. The students of the academy and the imperial college were in the city helping the Ministry of Works to repair the houses damaged in the war. After hearing the news, they carried countless bricks and stones to the prince's mansion. The soldiers and guards of the Yulin royal guards were ready, but their numbers were too small to frighten the angry people. Angry slogans echoed around the prince's mansion. Some people even took out tung oil and lit torches. At the most tense moment, a sad cry suddenly sounded inside the walls of the prince's mansion. A white banner stretched out behind the prince's mansion. Prince Li Peiyan of the Tang Empire was dead. The street became extremely quiet. Looking at the white banner in the spring rain, people put down the bricks and stones in their hands, and the newly lit torches gradually extinguished. Ning Ke stood at the entrance of the alley in the distance, quietly watching the scene. There was no emotional fluctuation on his face. Li Peiyan signed the peace treaty on behalf of the Tang Empire. For the West Hill Divine Palace, it did not mean the end of the negotiation or the final victory, because the Divine Hall still needed the Academy's signature. If possible, of course they would prefer Mr. First, who was famous for his benevolence, or Mr. Second, who was polite and honest. However, there was only one person in the Academy who entered the human realm, and that was Ning Quebec. At this time, Yanming Lake was shrouded in the misty spring rain, but it was not sad. Everyone in the West Hill Divine Palace Diplomatic Corps and the Grand Secretaries of the Tang Empire were in the hall. No one spoke, and everyone had different feelings. Needless to say, the West Hill Divine Palace, Grand Secretary Xing Jing and other officials of the Tang Empire looked very solemn. Everyone was waiting for Ning Ke to come back and sign. Yi Hongyu was also waiting in the plum garden, but Ning Ke did not appear, because he went to a place before returning to Yanming Lake. In front of the Guild Hall of Qinghe County was a straight street, and behind it were lakes and mountains. At this time, it was also misty in the spring rain, and the scenery was very beautiful. Several guards and more than 20 members of the Fish Dragon Gang were vigilantly watching the movements around the Guild Hall. When Chang'an City was in turmoil that night, the descendants of the warlords of Qinghe County in the Guild Hall took advantage of the chaos to escape. After that, it took a lot of effort to catch these people, and they did not want such a thing to happen again. If they knew that these people in the Guild Hall were about to be sent back to Qinghe County, they did not know how angry they would be. It was at this moment that Ning Ke walked into the Guild Hall of Qinghe County. He took the towel and wiped his hair that was wet from the spring rain, and dusted off the water droplets on his clothes, as natural as if he was returning home. Hello everyone, this is the only chapter today. Tomorrow will be the end of this volume. I need to think about it, and maybe write 3 or more chapters in one go. Recently, I have been scolded a lot, and I want to explain. Please don't say that I don't work hard usually, and pretend to ask for monthly votes at the end of the month. It won't be too late to scold me if I ask for it. The problem is, when did I seriously ask for monthly votes this month? The most important thing is, I don't plan to do it. I spread my hands. As for saying that my writing is bad, I can't do anything about it. I will try my best to write according to the standards that I think are good, and I hope that you can accept it. If I can't meet your standards, it means that I am not capable enough, and I can only wave my hands helplessly and say goodbye. I wish everyone a happy reading, and try not to scold me. Let me be happy too, okay? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 829. The war against the Tang Empire began with a conspiracy in Qingjing city of the Yan Kingdom, but the real turning point was in Qinghe County. The rebellion of the warlords in Qinghe County led to the destruction of the Tang Navy, and the lake in the Great Swamp was dyed red. After that, the West Hill Divine Palace Coalition Army invaded the north, and the Southern Army could not help in time. If the disciples of the Academy had not paid a heavy price to defend the verdant canyon, the Tang Empire would have been destroyed. This was the first rebellion since the founding of the Tang Empire. According to the news afterward, the scene was extremely bloody and tragic. Therefore, compared to the powerful West Hill Divine Palace and the Golden Palace, the warlords in Qinghe County were the targets of the Tang Army's anger. The warlords in Qinghe County still followed the old rules. In order to gain Liyu's trust and ensure the suddenness of the rebellion, they left hundreds of their clansmen in Chang'an City as hostages. Many of these clansmen were important figures in the warlords. When the news of the rebellion reached Chang'an City, these people naturally became the top priority of the Tang Empire's surveillance. The people in the guild hall had tried to escape and almost succeeded. In the end, they were captured by the ugly prefectural magistrate of Chang'an City, Shangguan Yangyu. From then on, they could not step out of the guild hall. There were 2 different opinions on how to deal with the descendants of the warlords in Qinghe County. One faction thought that they should be killed as quickly and cruelly as possible. Only then could they intimidate the rebel army in Qinghe County. At the same time, they could offer sacrifices to the spirits of the Tang Navy and hundreds of martyred officials. The other faction thought that if they wanted to intimidate the rebel army in Qinghe County and restrain the warlords, they should control the descendants of the warlords and use them as bargaining chips. With the arrival of the West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic corps, especially with the sudden change in the situation, the agreement between the 2 sides was about to be signed. Whichever faction's opinion was no longer important. The Tang officials could only watch as these people were taken out of the guild hall and sent back to Qinghe County. No matter how unwilling they were, they could only remain silent. At this moment, Ning Ke walked into the Qinghe County guild hall. He was greeted by a middle-aged official. He wore a Tang official uniform but did not wear a crown. He had straight eyes and looked dignified. "Greetings, Mr. 13, the middle-aged official said calmly and politely. Ning Ke said, "Since you don't admit that you are a Tang, why are you still wearing our official uniform?" The middle-aged official's name was Cui Yuan. He was the second son of the old master of the Cui family in Qinghe County. He had been an official in Chang'an for many years. Before the war, he had held a noble position in the Ministry of Rights. Although the Clear River County Guild Hall was under the strictest surveillance, the imperial court didn't deliberately humiliate the descendants of the major clans. They were provided with their daily necessities as usual, but there was no such thing as casual clothes when there were hundreds of people living in the guild hall. That was why Cui Yuan always wore his old official robes. Cui Yuan's smile was somewhat bitter as he said, I am an official of the Tang Empire. The elders in my clan were foolish and muddle-headed, and dared to have thoughts of betrayal. This has nothing to do with me. Ordinary people might have some considerations because of these words, but not Ning Quebec. He didn't care whether Cui Yuan's current attitude was sincere or not. All he knew was that this person was Old Master Cui's second son and an important character among the clans. He said, I heard that Old Master Cui has a few beloved grandsons who are also in the guild hall. Cui Yuan looked at his expression and knew that there was no need to hide anything in front of Mr. 13. He bowed deeply inside, saying, Please calm down, sir. Ning Ke said, Calming down is like being careful. It is very difficult. Moreover, the Tangs have always thought that Qinghe County belongs to us. The rebellion of the clans is like stabbing us in the back. Do you think that under such circumstances, the people living in this city will still welcome you with a smile? Cui Yuan's expression was a little ugly as he said, the clans have been scholars for thousands of years. They have a longer history than Chang'an. Now, they just want to return to thousands of years ago. They really don't dare to call themselves rebels. Ning Ke said, That makes sense. I know what you are worried about. Otherwise, with the conduct of the clans, even if I am trapped here and an unwelcome guest, I would still have a cup of tea. Cui Yuan said with a bitter smile, Who doesn't fear death? I am overly worried, sir. Please forgive me. Ning Ke said, Even though I cannot calm down, I have to tell you something unwillingly today. The West Hill Divine Palace wants to protect the lives of hundreds of you. When he said this, he had been paying attention to the expression on Cui Yuan's face. He saw that Cui Yuan was still calm after hearing the news, but there was a hint of joy in his eyes. This was exactly what he wanted to see. Cui Yuan bowed deeply to him again and said with a trembling voice, Even though I know how angry you are, I am still very grateful. When I return to Qinghe County, I will definitely restrain my clansmen and be on good terms with the Tang Empire. Ning Ke admired this person's performance. He thought that the clans of Qinghe County were indeed rich. Even a man who was sent to the capital as a hostage could still perform extremely well under such circumstances. He did not reveal any words or aura that might make the Tangs unhappy or angry. He said, I don't understand the intentions of the West Hill Divine Palace. Cui Yuan thought to himself, How could you not know? You are asking this question just to hear me out. He said bitterly, If we cannot protect Qinghe County, who in the world would dare to trust the Divine Hall? That makes sense. Ning Ke said thoughtfully, The reason is not about the loudness, but the strength of the fist. The Divine Hall's fist is bigger now, so they are more reasonable. Cui Yuan said harmoniously, The academy is only temporarily leading the way. Why are you so modest? I have never liked to be modest. Even in the world, the fist of Haotian Taoism is bigger now. But in Chang'an, the fist of the academy is definitely bigger. So I have decided to be reasonable first. Ning Ke looked at him and said, You said that if we cannot protect Qinghe County, who in the world would dare to trust the Divine Hall? This is very reasonable. So why don't I kill you? Cui Yuan frowned in confusion. If you want to kill us, why do you have to say so much? Ning Ke said, The clans of Qinghe County may really be able to recreate the glory of 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately, you and the people in the guild hall probably won't have the chance to see it. Hearing this, Cui Yuan's expression changed dramatically. He said in a low voice, What do you mean? Could it be that what you said before was false? Does the West Hill Divine Palace not have such a request? The West Hill Divine Palace does want you to live to prove the greatness of Haotian. Ning Ke looked at him and said, The problem is that Qinghe County has killed more than 300 officials of the Tang Empire. More than 1,000 people from the Navy to the auxiliary soldiers have died. More than 1,000 people are still doing hard labor in the coal mountain downstream of the Fujian River. Compared to the greatness of Haotian, I think these are more important. Cui Yuan understood what he meant. His body trembled uncontrollably. He shouted angrily, "Mr. 13, do you want to ruin the peace talks? Do you not want the Divine Hall to sign the peace treaty? Under the rule of the Tang Empire, the clans of Qinghe County have not been dogs for a whole 1,000 years. It has been too long. You seem to have forgotten what dogs do. You have forgotten the consciousness of being dogs." Ning Ke said, "You do have to look at the owner before you beat the dog. The owner will definitely want to protect his own dog. But if I really kill all of you, what can your owner do? At most, I will pay some money. Do you expect me to pay with my life? The life of a dog is cheap after all. It will never be as valuable as a human life." Ning Ke carried his padao and stood at the threshold of the Qinghe County Guild Hall, watching the lingering spring rain. The rain on his clothes had already dried, but there was a lot of fresh blood on them. Whether it was the Yulin Royal Guards or the Fish Dragon Gang, they were hesitant to kill some special targets. Ning Ke did not give them time to hesitate and chose to let his iron knife be stained with blood. He did not wipe the blood, because it would probably not be clean no matter how hard he tried. Continue writing. Try to update the second chapter before 12:30. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 830. Ning Ke returned to the house by the Yanming Lake. His clothes were stained with blood, which had been drenched by the spring rain. At this time, it had been diluted and looked like a watercolor painting. Many people were waiting for his return, waiting for him to sign his name and complete the agreement. The ministers of the Tang Empire, the head of the Revelation Institute of the West Hill Divine Palace, and the important figures in the diplomatic mission were all relieved to see him enter the house. Ning Ke took the towel from the maidservant and wiped the rain off his face. He walked to the table and read the detailed clauses in the agreement. Without any hesitation, he picked up the brush and prepared to sign. The head of the Revelation Institute looked at the blood on his clothes and suddenly had a bad feeling. He said in a low voice, "Wait, where did Mr. 13 go?" Before Ning Ke could answer, someone came to the Yanming Lake in the rain and told everyone in the room about the bloody incident in the Guild Hall of Qinghe County. The hall suddenly became quiet. The members of the West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic mission looked terrible. Lu Yiqing lowered his head and held the hilt of his sword tightly. Xie Qingyun looked at Ning Ke in shock. He could not imagine that his former classmate could be so cold-blooded. The officials of the Tang Empire were also shocked, but their emotions were completely different from the West Hill Divine Palace. Xing Jing, the Grand Secretary, looked at Ning Ke and nodded slightly in approval. General Xu Qing, who had been sitting silently in the corner, slammed the table hard and shouted, "Good job. The bloody incident in the Qinghe County Guild Hall was done by Mr. 13. The head of the Revelation Institute stared into Ning Ke's eyes and asked coldly. Ning Ke said, "Do I need to report to you? So you admit it?" The head of the Revelation Institute had a terrible look on his face. He shouted, "If that's the case, do you still want to sign this agreement?" Ning Ke did not care, even though he was the head of the West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic mission. He threw the brush back into the inkstone and walked to the back garden. He took a cold shower and asked the maidservant to make a pot of hot tea. Then he went directly to the plum garden. Yi Hongyu slowly stood up in the rain corridor and looked at him. She said, "Why are there more problems?" Ning Ke walked to her side and poured 2 cups of hot tea from the pot. He took 1 cup and held it in his hand to warm his palms that had been washed by the rain. Then he lay down on the bamboo chair. He said, the Tang Empire has always been very faithful to its promises. Once it's signed, it's not easy to take action. So, of course, I have to kill those people I want to kill before I sign. Yi Hongyu stared into his eyes and said, you promised that I wouldn't touch them. Ning Ke pushed the teacup to her and said, I promised you that I would send back the descendants of the clans in the Clear River Guild Hall. I didn't say that I would definitely send them back alive. Their corpses are all outside the courtyard. If the Divine Hall is interested, they can bring them back to Clear River at any time. I have no interest in collecting their corpses. Yi Hongyu said, do you think this is interesting? Ning Ke said, of course it's interesting. Otherwise, why would I do it? Even if you think word games are boring, you have to understand that I haven't signed that piece of paper, so I can do anything. Yi Hongyu said, aren't you worried that you will anger me? Anger can't decide the outcome. Just like how you have angered me long ago, I can't kill you because I can't control the situation. Similarly, you can't decide everything. Regardless of whether it's the hierarch or the person hiding behind the scenes, they all need you to bring the agreement back to the Divine Hall. So, your anger can't affect anything. Ning Ke took a sip of tea and said, moreover, we have already given you what you want the most. Those people in the Clear River Guild Hall are just accessories and not important at all. Yi Hongyu said, it's not up to you to decide whether it's important or not. The clans in Qinghe County are just a group of dogs raised by the Divine Hall. You might be angry that these dogs have been killed, but you won't go so far as to fall out with the Academy just because of this. On the contrary, don't you think that it's not a bad thing for the Divine Hall to let me vent my anger? Ning Ke smiled and said, also, I might not be able to decide whether this matter is important to you. So, I did it first before telling you. This is helping you make the decision. The spring rain was pattering in front of the eaves, and the sky was a little dark. The robe of judgment on Yi Hongyu's body was like a blood flag, but it could not cover up the smell of blood coming from Ning Quebec. He had already taken a bath, but the smell of blood was still strong. He really didn't know how many people he had killed in the Clear River Guild Hall. No matter how much bitter tea he drank, it would be difficult to cleanse his heart. It was quiet in the corridor for a long time. Yi Hongyu said, it's all over. Ning Ke said, or, it's just the beginning. Yi Hongyu looked at him and asked, will you still kill people like today in the future? Ning Ke thought for a moment and said, I do have many people I want to kill. Yi Hongyu raised her eyebrows slightly and said, your name will be on the agreement. Ning Ke smiled and said, you know how shameless I can be. Yi Hongyu said, even in the name of the Academy? I have never cared about my teacher's reputation. Ning Ke put down the teacup and stood up to stretch. He called out to the spring rain in front of the eaves and said, if the Divine Hall cares, I can quit the Academy at any time. Yi Hongyu said, you don't seem to have thought that the Divine Hall will not keep to the agreement if you kill too many people. Ning Ke turned to look at her and said, the people that the Academy is afraid of are not in the Divine Hall. In the eyes of those two, the people of the world are like ants. Why would they be angry just because a few ants died? Of course, I will only kill those who can be killed, and try not to make the Divine Hall too angry. Yi Hongyu said, you want to test the bottom line of Haotian Taoism? Ning Ke said mockingly, since when does Haotian Taoism have a bottom line? Yi Hongyu looked at him and said, do you know why I don't care about the murder in the Clear River Guild Hall? Ning Ke said, of course not, because you really treat those people as dogs. That's right. Yi Hongyu said, those people are already dead. And I believe that even if you want to kill more people, no matter how many people you want to kill, you will not be able to. Why? Ning Ke asked calmly. Because you will never be able to walk out of Chang'an. She looked into Ning Ke's eyes indifferently and said, you will be trapped in Chang'an for the rest of your life. You are just an angry prisoner. Ning Ke did not say anything, because it was the truth. If he left Chang'an, Haotian Taoism would definitely do everything possible to kill him at all costs. Because he was invincible in the city, and weak outside the city. He was the array eye of Chang'an. The West Hill Divine Palace's diplomatic corps left Chang'an. When they came, they did not have much hope. When they left, they obtained countless treasures and a victory that no one had ever obtained before. Only Yi Hongyu and the headmaster of the Revelation Institute knew the real secret of the negotiation within the Divine Hall's diplomatic corps. The headmaster of the Revelation Institute was not satisfied with the agreement because he knew that Haotian Taoism had two hidden grand cultivators with unfathomable states. Instead, he was puzzled. He did not understand why the West Hill Divine Palace did not take this opportunity to continue their war against the Tang Empire. Instead, they chose a truce. Yi Hongyu looked at the shadows of willow branches in the rain outside the window and thought to herself, drinking can kill, writing hairpin-style small regular script can kill, and reading can kill. No one except Divine Lord Lotus wants to see such a world. Moreover, Mr. First has learned how to fight. Jun Mo does not even pick up his crown when it falls to the ground. Mr. Third is the cicada, and Ning Ke is not afraid of death anymore. Who dares to say that they will win against such an academy? Ning Ke stood under the southern city gate and looked at the falling rain. He said, "The rain is getting lighter." Chapter 831. Every death in the world is a reunion after a long separation. This sentence was obscure and artistic. It was not like the spring breeze at this time, but more like the spring breeze with sand and lust that would blow in Chang'an for a few days in late spring. Ning Ke thought about it for a long time but did not understand what it meant. He did not even have a clue, so he became more and more worried. Not being able to leave Chang'an was his biggest worry. This city was his city of worries. He was trapped in the city of worries, so he sat on the high city wall and stared blankly every day. The Empress came and walked to his side. She gently rubbed his head and said tenderly, "You still don't understand the meaning of that sentence." According to the seniority in the academy, the Empress should call Ning Ke youngest uncle. But she was older than Ning Ke and was considered an elder in the eyes of His Majesty. Especially since last autumn, she and Ning Ke returned to Chang'an from the wilderness. They had gone through thick and thin together and trusted each other, so she naturally did this. Ning Ke shook his head gently. He did not understand the sentence. The Empress and his senior brothers and sisters at the back of the mountain of the academy also did not understand the profound meaning of the drunkard's words. They analyzed for a long time and found that there was a similar description in the West Hill scripture. The death of all lives in the world was not the end, but the return to the glory of Haotian's divine kingdom. The problem was that the only person who was qualified to say this was Haotian herself. The Empress looked at him and asked, "Do you still think it's not her?" Ning Ke said, "Sang Sang is dead." The Empress asked, "Why are you so sure?" Ning Ke looked at the thread-like streets below and searched for the location of the old brush pen shop. He said, "She is my natal life. If she is still alive, I would definitely know." The Empress walked to the city wall and said slowly, "Many people have died, but the problem is still not solved." Ning Ke did not care about the undercurrents in the court, but he knew what she meant. Although no one dares to say it publicly, there are still many people who find it hard to accept that I, the Holy Virgin of the Devil's sect, will be in charge of the Tang Empire. At the very least, they are very resistant to it. This is not a good thing. The agreement with the West Hill Divine Palace is still a thorn in the hearts of the Tangs. Li Peiyan's death can only alleviate it, but not completely solve it. Because all the Tangs know that I am the one who keeps my word in the palace. The Li family has ruled the Tang Empire for thousands of years and has been supported by the people for thousands of years. As a member of the royal family, I should die for the people. I'm the daughter-in-law of the Li family and I'm willing to do something. You were right that day in the hall. Li Huiyuan is dead and Li Yu only has her brother left. I believe she will know what to do. The Empress looked at the city she had lived in for many years and spoke with a smile. Ning Kei's heart sank with every word she said. Before she could finish, he said, "Please wake up, Her Highness. Don't think about those unreasonable things." The Empress gradually stopped smiling. She looked through the clouds outside the city wall and looked at the looming palace in the distance. She said calmly, "I didn't intend to reason with you, Mr. 13. Ning Kei stared at her hands on the city wall and asked, "Why?" "Because I'm tired. I'm really tired now." The Empress frowned slightly, looking indescribably delicate and lovely. In fact, her face was not very beautiful, but just a slight change in her expression made her look beautiful. It was only at this moment that people would remember that she was the legendary saintess of the Devil's Doctrine who was the best at manipulating people's hearts. Many years ago, I was just a very ordinary girl by the Daming Lake. I don't know why the elders in the sect chose me as the saintess and ordered me to go south to seduce the crown prince of the Tang Empire, waiting for the chaos. She said, at that time, I thought he was a fatuous and lustful person, so I was naturally unwilling. Besides, I didn't think I was good at seducing men, so I decided to kill him. Ning Kei asked, "Your Majesty suffered a hidden injury at that time?" The Empress said, "Yes, but I didn't kill him at that time, so I thought I had failed. I didn't expect that he didn't blame me and even hid many truths for me." Ning Kei was silent. Although he knew that His Majesty was a person who valued relationships, he still couldn't understand why he would make such a choice back then. Only then did I realize that he had truly fallen in love with me. Thus, I began to reject him while welcoming him. I used all the skills that I learned in the Enlightenment doctrine, or rather, the skills that I was born with, on him until he could no longer leave me and even decided to welcome me into the palace. The Empress smiled and said, "At that time, I thought I had won, but I didn't expect that I would lose in the end. Because I spent too much time on him, I unknowingly fell in love with him. Just like how he couldn't leave me, I couldn't leave him either. His Majesty is one of the two men who love me the most in this world. I helped him deal with state affairs for a period of time. Rumor has it that he didn't let me continue to deal with it because of some gossip. Only I know that it was because he was worried that I would overwork myself. I have the ability to deal with state affairs, but I really don't like it. I just like talking and laughing with him, playing with him, throwing a little tantrum, and making some food. That's all." He left. Because of the injury that I planted in him many years ago, I had to hold on and stay calm until I returned to Chang and from the wilderness until I settled his affairs. I think I handled it well. When I see His Majesty, I believe that he will be satisfied. Then what reason do I have to stay here? I don't want him to wait for me for too long. It was quiet on the city wall. Ning Kei's gaze still fell on the Empress's hand on the city wall. He felt very complicated at this time. He was shocked and confused, but he couldn't find the right words to describe it. He said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Don't you think that's very selfish?" The Empress smiled and said, "I am the siren of the Devil's Doctrine in the eyes of the world. It's natural for me to be selfish." Ning Kei said, "The prince is still young. He still needs you as his mother to raise him. My son has Mr. First as his teacher. What else do I need to worry about? I have already made arrangements. Su Qi and Xing Jing have written me letters. The situation is difficult but stable. The court has its own rules. It doesn't matter whether I am there or not. It's actually good for the Tang Empire if I am not there. At least those Haotian Taoism charlatans can no longer use my background to talk about things." The smile on her face seemed to be shining and extremely proud. Ning Kei said, "I won't allow this to happen." The Empress smiled and said, "I remember someone once said that there are only two things in this world that no one can control. Even Haotian can't control, and that is life and death." Ning Kei still wanted to say something. The empress looked at him and said calmly, I have said before that there are two men in the world who love me the most. In addition to His Majesty, the other one is my brother Xiahou. And he happened to die in your hands. Ning Ke did not say anything. How you felt when Sang Sang died was how I felt when His Majesty closed his eyes. At that time, I jumped down from Helan City because I was forced by the situation. Now that I think about it, maybe I already had the will to die at that time. But Helan City is still a little short. The Empress looked at the clouds below the city wall and said with a smile, I think Chang'an City should be tall enough. She was smiling, but the expression on her face was as indifferent as the clouds and smoke, as if she was no longer in this world. Then she left the city wall and fell into the clouds. Ning Ke had countless ways to catch her or pull her back, but he did not do anything because his body was very stiff and because he saw her face when she left. Her skirt was swaying like a flower. She closed her eyes and the expression on her face was so peaceful, as if she was about to enter the best world, which made people feel extremely comforted and at ease. Not many people had the heart to break that kind of peace. Ning Ke stood on the city wall and looked at the flowing clouds for a long time. Then he left. Many people came and went in his life, and they never came back. And they left so suddenly or decisively, which made him feel lost and sad. His family and friends in the general's mansion, the headmaster and Sang Sang, His Majesty and the Empress were all like that. There was a great fear between life and death. Ning Ke had lived 2 lives and was used to seeing life and death in the wilderness of Min Mountain. But he had never understood the great fear that even eminent monks and Vedanta could not see through. On the night that Hua Shangyue wanted to save Li Yu from Chang'an, he once said to Cao Xiaoshu that such an idiotic behavior was really hard to understand. That was because he had never understood love. What is love in the world? It makes people live and die for it. Ning Ke always remembered this sentence. He always felt that this sentence was too literary and pedantic, and he did not like it. Just like that sentence, every death in the world is a reunion after a long separation. It was not until this moment that he finally understood a little. After Ning Ke walked down the city wall, he went directly to the princess mansion. He lifted the layers of gauze on the balcony, looked at Li Yu and said directly, the Empress has passed away. Li Yu was telling a story to Xiao Man. Ning Ke looked carefully and found that it was the story that he had told her before. Hearing this, she did not react. After a long time, she slowly raised her head, and her pale face was full of confusion. Why? If I say that it is for love, I don't know if you will believe me. Ning Ke looked at her and said, get ready to enter the palace. I will send Xiao Man to the academy to study. In the blink of an eye, it was late spring in Chang'an, but it was still rainy. The people had not completely gotten rid of the sorrow of the Empress' death. The soldiers waiting on the Vermilion Bird Avenue still had white cloth wrapped around their arms. The Yulin royal guards solemnly lined up in front of the palace. Solemn and elegant music resounded in the palace. The civil and military officials of the imperial court, dressed in court clothes, filed in under the guidance of eunuchs. The bell gradually rang. On this day, the new emperor of the Tang Empire officially ascended the throne. There is one more chapter, the last plot of this volume. There should not be too many words. I continue to write. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 832. It rained heavily during the Qingming festival. As time went by, Chang'an City really calmed down. Those who had passed away were not forgotten, but kept in the depths of their hearts. In the seemingly lively and joyful streets, there was an invisible force quietly accumulating, ready to burst out at any time. The officials in the court were fiercely debating about political affairs. Some military generals were impatient and came forward to propose a new plan, which led to a new round of debate. Shangguan Yangyu, who had been promoted from prefectural magistrate of Chang'an City to Grand Secretary of the Hall of Illustrious Persons a month ago, squinted his wretched triangular eyes and stroked his sparse goatee, fighting with the officials of the Ministry of Revenue again. A childish boy sat on the throne, listening to the officials' debate. Obviously, there were many things he did not understand, but his expression was focused and calm. Only his bright yellow robe, which was wrinkled by his two small hands, showed his nervousness and confusion. The newly ascended emperor would probably still be a playful child in the eyes of the common people. Being able to have such a steady performance already made the officials in the court very satisfied. Every time they thought of this, their gazes towards the wheelchair at the side of the throne became even more respectful. The wheelchair was very ordinary. It was a little dazzling in the solemn and magnificent hall of the palace. But because of the scholar sitting in the wheelchair, it was no longer dazzling. The scholar wore an old cotton-padded jacket and held an old book in his hand. He did not listen to the discussion in the court, but just quietly read as usual. However, many people in the hall had been paying attention to him. Even if the scholar was tired from reading and frowned, it would cause a lot of speculation. The little emperor was the same. He could sit on the throne, endure the boring government affairs, and at least appear focused and calm, because his teacher was beside him. The scholar was his teacher. The eldest brother of the academy. After the court meeting, the relevant memorials and files were not sent to the imperial study, but to a side hall in the depths of the palace. The little emperor also came at the same time. Li Yu lived in this side hall. With the death of the empress, there were no more disputes between the two factions. All the officials put their energy into government affairs and war preparations. The academy had no interest or ability in dealing with state affairs. As the royal sister, she was naturally the most suitable candidate. Now, every day, she had to read memorials and read files. Most importantly, she had to teach His Majesty how to deal with government affairs. The Empress was right before she passed away. She only had this one younger brother now. The academy did not restrict her movements, but for some reason, Li Yu rarely left her palace after she moved into the palace. As for the courtiers who were loyal to her, she had never seen them before. The spring rain fell in the imperial palace. After the officials walked out of the main hall, some of them could not help but look into the depths of the imperial palace, revealing a sorrowful expression. Most of them nodded to the imperial study not far away before leaving the imperial palace. After a long time, the door of the imperial study slowly opened. Ning Ke washed his hands in a copper basin carried by a palace maid and thanked her. He picked up the umbrella by the door and walked into the spring rain. At this time, the spring rain was no longer cold. It was just a lingering feeling. Moreover, the rain was so light that there was no need to hold an umbrella. Walking on the wet street was a special feeling. Ning Ke could not leave the city now, so he was used to walking around the city. He went to the old brush pen shop and found that the wall had been repaired, but the old cat was nowhere to be found. Then he returned to the house by the Yanming Lake and looked at the thin willows and dewy lotus leaves by the lake. He was silent for a long time as usual. Eldest brother was in the palace, second brother was guarding the academy, and third sister had left. Master Huang Yang had not recovered after being seriously injured by the Abbey Dean. He left Chang'an the day before yesterday and said that he wanted to go to the Xiankong temple again. But this time, he was not going to study Buddhism, but to ask the disciples of the Buddhism sect to solve some doubts in his heart. Many people had died or left, but there were always people who missed or were sentimentally attached to them. However, as Ning Ke had once thought, not many people remembered Sang Sang except for the cat in the old brush pen shop and the lotus in the Yanming Lake. The yellow-haired Sang Sang, the black-haired Sang Sang, the diligent Sang Sang, the Sang Sang that could be hugged in summer, and the ugly Sang Sang were all easily forgotten. She was too inconspicuous. Whether she was the daughter of Yama, the successor of light, or the incarnation of Haotian, she disappeared just like that. The maidservant brought a letter. Ning Kei tore open the envelope and found that it was a return receipt from the letter office. There was a banknote that had been returned to him. He looked at the banknote and thought of many things. He closed his eyes and thought of many things again. He increasingly felt that he was really like a prisoner in Chang'an, and it became difficult for him to breathe. He thought for a long time and finally walked out of the courtyard. He looked at the driver in front of the black horse carriage and said, "It seems a bit wrong to ask you to be my driver." The driver was Wang Jinglu. After General Su Shi died in battle, he rushed back to Chang'an to report the news, and then stayed in the military ministry. For some reason, he had become Ning Kei's driver now. Wang Jinglu said indifferently, "As long as you can fulfill your promise, I will do anything." Ning Kei said, "Definitely." Wang Jinglu asked, "Where are we going?" Ning Kei said, "The South City Gate." The black horse carriage moved silently on the streets in the spring rain. Not long after, it arrived at the South City Gate. The horse carriage stopped at the city gate for a long time. The rain on the walls of the carriage gradually dried, but there was still no movement. No one knew whether the people in the carriage wanted to enter or leave the city. The soldiers of the city gate department and the surrounding stalls all recognized the black horse carriage. This was because the horse carriage often stopped at the city gate for a long time in recent days. Many people's eyes fell on the black horse carriage, wanting to see if it would leave the city today. Time passed slowly. Wang Jinglu said, "There are actually many places to visit in the city." Ning Kei did not speak in the carriage. He held the letter tightly in his hand, but it was as if he had seen the Empress jump in front of his eyes. He once again experienced that feeling. "Let's go," he said. Wang Jinglu lifted the reins and was ready to turn the horse carriage around. He asked, "Where to?" Ning Kei said, "Out of the city." Wang Jinglu's hand that was holding the reins slightly stiffened. He said, "Are you sure?" Ning Kei said, "If I don't even dare to go 10 miles out of the city, how can I kill people from 10,000 miles away in the future?" 10 miles south of Chang'an, there was a pavilion. There were large patches of weeds and many graves. Ning Kei first went to the joint grave of His Majesty and the Empress, and then to the cemetery of the military ministry, where many soldiers who had died in battle were buried. Then he pushed aside the weeds and came to the graves of Yan Sei and Wei Guangming. When you left, you should have seen a lot of the future. But why do people always have to die to see it? What meaning does it have to the people who are still alive? After saying this, he walked to the left and came to the newly built grave. This stone grave was very small, just as small as Sang Sang. Because there were only a few maidservant clothes, half a box of notes, and 2 boxes of cosmetics from Chenjinji Cosmetics Store. Zheng Jing and his wife stood in front of the grave, supporting each other. Mrs. Zheng's eyes were very red and swollen. It seemed that she had been crying in front of the grave for a long time. The servants of the Grand Secretary's mansion were cleaning up the incense and candles around. Ning Kei came forward and said respectfully, "Father-in-law, you should take my mother-in-law back first." Grand Secretary Zheng Jing did not expect to see him outside the city. He was shocked at first, but then he understood the reason. He suddenly burst into tears and patted Ning Kei's shoulder with relief. The people of the Grand Secretary's mansion had returned to the city. Ning Kei stood alone in front of Song Song's grave. He took out the letter from his bosom and tore the note in half. One half was burned in front of the grave along with the receipt, and the other half was carefully put back into his bosom. Then he left. The black horse carriage approached Chang'an. He sat in the carriage and listened to the spring rain knocking on the window in silence. Suddenly, the wind came from the north. In this late spring wind, too much yellow soil in the north became yellow mud after being drenched by the rain. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, dripping down from the city walls to the ground like a yellow curtain falling over the city. He thought of the mud wall in the city of Wei. That note was sent to the city of Wei. Sang Sang had been sending notes to the city of Wei every month since she came to Chang'an. But this receipt said, no such person found. Yes, there was no one in the city of Wei. Sang Sang was also gone. Ning Kai cried bitterly. He jumped off the horse carriage and walked into the rain. The rain fell on his face and mixed with his tears. The black horse carriage followed behind him. A passerby who was hurrying to avoid the rain saw this strange scene and asked confusedly, "Why don't you take the carriage? It's not the right time to enjoy the rain. It's so dirty." Ning Kai wiped the water off his face and pointed at the willow tree by the state highway that was still green even though it was hit by the muddy rain. He said, "But it's spring, isn't it?" The end of the 4th volume, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 833. Jiang Yi had already written 4 volumes. The first volume was about the empire in the morning, the second was about the lake in winter, the third was about the troubled times, and the fourth was about the year of the curtain. I liked the titles of these volumes very much, because the titles and the contents of each volume could be harmoniously combined. For example, the 3 cold lakes in the second volume, the 2 autumns in the third volume, and the curtain falling several times in the fourth volume, the curtain falling on people or the city. At the end of the volume, I was used to chatting with everyone, reviewing or explaining. But most of the time, I just wanted to chat. The first thing I wanted to say was that I liked the 4th volume very much, even more than the second. I said a few days ago that I wanted to finish the content of this volume in a few days, and then I extended it a lot. It was not because I was reluctant to finish it, nor was it because I wanted to write more. It was because I thought about it carefully and moved the content of the next volume, which was mainly about the peace talks, to the 4th volume. Because I wanted this volume to end on the yellow sand, spring rain, and Qingming festival. Jiang Yi had been preparing to write 7 volumes since the year before last, because he wanted to compare the 7 volumes of the Tomes of Arcane in the Jishou Abbey. Now, because the plot was moved forward, and because I suddenly realized why I had to follow the Haotian Taoism, I decided to follow the path of the Academy's 6 arts, or 6 classics. The book was divided into 6 volumes. There were too many things I was satisfied with in the 4th volume. There was a Sang Sang on everyone's back, and they had to flee thousands of miles in the face of the world. The bowstring was broken like a mess of a zither. Eldest brother came to the White Tower Temple, the bloody battle in the quagmire, the war in the wilderness, and Ning Kai's dream became reality. The headmaster was really as high as the sky. He borrowed a sword from the south, and then he killed the giant golden dragon and the divine general. Then he waved his hand and the wind and rain fell. He was indeed a great foodie. The 3 of them traveled around the world, thinking about this world, and told the story of the past. By the Sisui River, Sang Sang's white lotus feet and dark body finally had meaning. The headmaster ascended to heaven and turned into a bright moon. It rained heavily in the human world. Ning Kai howled like a wolf in the wilderness after the rain. Then, the whole world attacked the Tang Empire, the moon rose from the verdant canyon, the eldest brother Wu Ju fought against the Abbey Dean, the cicadas for 23 years, the hierarch became an idiot, Ning Kai beheaded the emperor, and the millions of people in Chang and used their blades. Finally, the word appeared in the sky for the first time. I finished all the plots in 2 paragraphs. As I was writing, I was combing the images in my head, and I was even a little excited. It was the same for the 4 chapters yesterday. The Empress jumped off the city wall, which was decided at the beginning of the book. In this great romance story, there must be a couple of lovers doing this kind of old-fashioned, but sometimes very touching demonstration. In the Qing dynasty, there was also an empress who jumped off the city wall, but it was completely different. I had always liked the empress, but it was a pity that I didn't have enough foreshadowing because of the angle and the number of words. But there was no other way. If I really wrote those things thoroughly, people would definitely say that it was a joke. The drunkard conveyed the words to Ning Ke on behalf of someone. Every death in the world is a reunion after a long separation. This was seen from a grandmaster. Wang Jiu's words, every death in the world is a reunion after a long separation. It was indeed bitter. The reason why I wrote it this way was that I couldn't think of a better way to express it, and I thought it was more reasonable than the movie, because this sentence had a specific meaning in the story, instead of being purely emotional. As for what the truth of this sentence was, please refer to the 5th volume. As I said before, I liked all the titles, but I didn't know if I liked the 5th volume, because, until now, I hadn't figured out the title of the 5th volume. I was very anxious. The beginning of the last volume already made me anxious. It was really troublesome to have the two together. I was supposed to write it today, because I had used up today's holiday a few days ago. But after thinking about it, I had to stop writing for one day. I just made up for my debt, so I didn't want to owe more. At least, I wanted to maintain the dignity of an old man. I would use next Saturday to make up for today, so that I didn't owe any debt. Please understand. In April, the new chapter would be more than 160,000 words. It was not that I was too tired after writing 4 chapters yesterday, but simply because I couldn't decide on the title of the 5th volume, and the first few chapters of the 5th volume were too troublesome and difficult to write. The 5th volume was indeed difficult to write. The overall framework had already been decided. The ceiling of the human world had already been laid. The battle situation had already been decided. It was as solid as a quagmire. To break out of the situation, especially a situation with new ideas, was very difficult. I had already thought of a method, but I didn't know if I had the ability to realize that method. My current mood was like when I wrote about Fan Xian going to Jiangnan in the year of Qinyu. I was terrified to death. But looking back, this kind of panic was a very good thing, because the Jiangnan volume of the year of Qinyu was, without a doubt, the most solid. In terms of standard, it was the best volume. So, I hoped that Jiang Ye's 5th volume could also be done to this level. But the style of the next volume would definitely be completely different from the one in the year of Qinyu. I had my own ambitions. I wanted to put the large and open things into a very small bag, and cover the dark and bloody things with beautiful silk. I hope that by the end of the 5th volume, everyone will feel that the method I chose was awesome and innovative. Then, I will feel happy. I will report this to you and look forward to your encouragement. After finishing the 1st volume, Jiang Yi held a very successful book review competition. Today, when the 4th volume ends, the new book review competition will also officially begin. Everyone is welcome to participate. For the specific details, please go to the book review section to take a look at the top posts. In another 2 days, I will also specially post a single chapter. Finally, I sincerely wish you a happy life, good health, good luck in everything, and happy reading. Good night. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.